All right, this week I sit down with Brett Joy from the Just Hunt Club. If you haven't watched any of Just Hunt Club's videos, go to their YouTube page, subscribe, and they really put out some awesome content. In my opinion, some of the best content in the Northeast. They really give off the type of vibe that the hunting public does, and everybody loves the hunting public. They're awesome, but these guys are focusing on Northeastern content. Yeah, they'll do some stuff outside of the Northeast here and there, but a lot of it is relatable to the Northeast. All the stuff that we as Northeastern hunters can relate to. So get on there, watch those guys' videos, hit the subscribe button, go to their website, justhuntclub.com. They have an awesome giveaway. If you go to their events tab there, it'll explain everything about the giveaway, but they're giving away the first place prize is a 2-day turkey hunt with John Lewis and Brett Joy in New Hampshire, plus a Mossberg turkey gun of your choice, plus a pro membership to Hunt Stand. And then the second place prize is a Mossberg shotgun plus a pro membership to Hunt Stand. So I think all you got to do is enter your email to their newsletter. It's relatively easy. Go make sure you do that. It's awesome prizes. And we're talking to Brett in this episode about big woods hunting in New Hampshire. He really is a student of deer behavior, deer biology. He's a scorer, so he's looked at tons of skulls and antlers. He likes to gauge age on deer by just many different factors that we'll get into that. But he's now he just wants to kill big old deer. The age is the number one factor. So he's trying to kill 6.5, 7.5, 8.5-year-old deer. Those are his targets these days. We talk about how different pockets of deer across the country just behave totally differently. So we get into some really good stuff about how, if you're listening to this, take some things away from, every podcast, of course, but make sure that you're applying it to what your local deer do and how they behave. They might not be behaving the same way that the big woods deer behave, or they might not be behaving the same way as a suburban deer does, but you can apply some of this stuff to how your deer locally behave. You just have to learn how they do that. So let's get into this podcast. Brett Joy from Just Hunt Club, and a quick reminder, they will be at Huntstock doing some seminars. They'll have a booth in our sponsorship area, meet and greet, probably selling some swag. So make sure you come down and say hi to these guys. Here is Brett Joy. All right, another episode of Hunt Suburbia podcast, and sitting here with Brett Joy. Thanks for coming down, dude.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. How long was the drive?
Hour and 40 or something like that.
Yeah, that's not too bad.
Nah, it's not terrible. I don't live too far from Mass. So
John Moulton came down from New Hampshire a couple weeks ago, and it was his first time coming down south of Manchester in a few years, he says.
Yeah, I get down south of Manchester plenty because of I work in Manchester. So,
oh, you do?
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, what do you do?
So my family owns a precision sheet metal shop, but we deal with a specialized alloy. It's called mu metal. It's a high nickel alloy, and it absorbs and redirects electromagnetic flux away from precision electronic equipment. So kind of like confusing, but it's a real niche business, kind of techie. So we design a lot of shields for like medical devices, missile guidance.
I was going to say, you probably do some military work.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, we don't have direct contracts with the government, but we definitely work on some stuff that is, we'll say top secret, I guess, is the easiest way to put it. So, I helped her run that business. My father's kind of semi-retired, and his business partner as well. So they're kind of in the background now, and, myself and my father's business partner's son are kind of running the business with a couple other obviously key players, and we're extremely busy right now, and the company's growing. So I've been busy with that as well as all the hunting stuff.
So that's how I was wondering how you balance your work and hunting.
So it's funny. Everybody asks me that, and I do hunt. I do have a pretty flexible schedule, but I don't think it's as flexible as people think. I've just it's become more flexible as I've grown with my role within the company, and kind of delegate tasks to an extent and schedule and kind of
become
make
more
the time
efficient probably with hunting.
Well, that's exactly what it is. I've learned to be, because I had to be. I didn't have that much time 10 years ago, and I had to be extremely efficient, and it's cool because, well, it's benefited me because I learned that fast, and that's my style of hunting is efficiency, and my style of scouting and everything is about efficiency and maximizing every hour that I have to allocate towards hunting. There was a period, where I had a lot more time, but now I have 3 kids. So thank God I learned how to hunt efficiently, like when I didn't have time at work and didn't have the time off. Now I have a little more time off, but I have the kids, so it kind of negates any extra time off that I have, been afforded over the past several years. So now I'm back to efficiency mode, but it's fine, and I think that I'm able to still do a lot with a little time, and I've learned kind of how to do it and really what matters and where to spend my time that's going to yield like the best result and the best experience too. It's not always about the end result for me. So
yeah, it's like that's same thing with me. Is I've got a kid, but I've learned, and I'm lucky enough to be working from home now. COVID kind of jump started the whole work from home phase for some folks who have an office job. So it lets me instead of getting on a train and going into Boston and spending an hour and a half every day doing the whole commute thing. Yeah, that's an hour and a half now. That once my kids at daycare, I've got a little bit. Yeah. Like I've been shed hunting about an hour and a half every day.
That's awesome.
And it's just staying close to home, trying to keep tabs on bucks.
Absolutely, that's great. I think that's a huge change. And I mean, I get anxiety when I go into the city now. Manchester, New Hampshire is about as much as I can take for work.
Yep.
When I go down south of the border, like this is not too bad down here, I guess. But when I get towards Boston, I start to get, I gotta get out of here. So for me, that would be a huge deal being able to work from home.
Yeah.
But yeah, we never even my business didn't shut down during COVID at all. We were an essential business or whatever. So. We didn't have obviously it's impacted us, but not to the same degree as some other people. So it's been actually been fortunate in that regard to keep on going. And I don't know. I don't know how well I do with the working from home thing.
Yeah.
With the 3 kids at home and I have trouble. I think it's good for me, to get to the office and be able to focus on that and then, separate that and leave and whatnot. So.
Well, you can't get anything done when your kids are there for sure.
No, it's crazy.
Like when my kid's home from daycare and when they start going to daycare, they're home a lot because they bring home sicknesses and they can't be at daycare. So you got to try to work and you really can't get anything done.
It's funny to relate that to hunting. I think anymore I try to, unless I'm hunting. Like I have some property that I live on that I hunt, but I don't take it super seriously, and I don't hunt it all that much. But I try to actually camp where I hunt if I can, because I feel like when I'm home, it's like the second you walk in that door, you're not at all. It's okay. I got to do this. I got to clean this. I got to take help with the kids, and then we got to dinner and this. And it's like all this stuff, and then like. Next thing I know, I'm going to bed at like midnight. Yeah. Because I got to take care of this gear issue or get ready for the morning, and then it's like you can't really focus on that too. And I just feel like if I'm hunting for any period of time, like days at a time, I get so run down. Yeah, you're in and out of it, and it's like it just gets really tough. Yeah. So if I can take that time, and my wife's awesome, and she's just great. So she allows me to do a lot of stuff, and she can handle a ton on her own. I try to actually just go and be there even if it's for 3 days or whatever. I just feel like you can be more, you're just in the zone, like you said, and you don't get out of it. You get less or more sleep, less like time doing other stuff and worrying about that. So that's one of the things that I've kind of moved to.
Deer camp, it's the whole deer camp. It's all I did growing up was hunting at deer camp, and it's a totally different thing now. Hunting out of my house most of the time. I'm driving within an hour to my hunting spots, and I'm back. I'm back the same night. So it takes you right out of the zone, but.
Well, it's different. Sometimes that's what you can do, so you do it, right? You got to do what you can.
Yeah, it gets me more time in the woods for sure.
Which is great.
Rather than going to Vermont every weekend and just hunting there. Yep. So, So let's you had a good season this year. I saw you killed the buck that I said was like Milo Hansen Jr. at one point, because that thing is wide, symmetrical, and beautiful.
So wide.
That was the first one of the season, right?
Yep, that was in Canada, September 5th.
Scored in the 180s.
Yeah, right around there.
Yeah.
Of course, he's in velvet, so that's always like a weird thing with score because it's higher when they're in velvet and whatnot. And I don't know. I am a scorer for the New Hampshire book, but I'm not also. And I think score is interesting, and it's
for sure.
It's cool to see, like, for conversation, like, oh, that buck, like, it helps to quantify like the magnitude of an animal, but at the same time, sometimes it doesn't do a lot of animals justice.
Yeah.
Especially a big old deer that doesn't score much. So I don't really, I'm not super caught up on score. It's interesting. I like to talk about it, but at the end of the day, it's just a number.
Just another stat. But how many stats do we got to talk about for deer?
Yeah,
you got
that's
weight,
true.
you got score, you got age, right?
Oh, and I find I love stats and numbers. Like, I like to always, like, I don't say compare, but like just, I feel like if you can, if you have a baseline for something, you can always try to improve on it or do better. And I don't know if that's necessarily like what everybody's trying to do hunting wise. And it's not necessarily I'm always trying to do, but with just in everyday life, I'm always like, okay, we did this last year. What can we do this year? What's the next step and how do we grow? How do you grow as a person, as a hunter in your profession, whatever. So I do like stats, but at the same time, I feel like you have to be careful with the deer hunting thing, because one of the things that I always worry about is just how other people perceive you. If all you're talking about is score and like weight and like this, it's like, it's like, is that all you care about? Is like the actual number? Is that deer a number? Is it an actual wild animal that you took its life? So I am always kind of cautious as to talk too much about it. Mm-hmm. Although I think it's interesting, and like anybody that like knows me knows that I'm not about that. And if I'm talking about it, I'm just a curious thing. Like, that buck had 27-inch beams. They were so long. Like, it's not like, 27-inch beams and this and this and this, and he scores this and this mass, and he's like number 3, and it's like, all right, that's like, all right, cool it, buddy. It's like, it's 156 and 6/8. It's like, okay, like, all right, like, and I think for a lot of people that maybe haven't had many deer scored and they find out, or you kill like a state record class buck, that's super interesting. But I try not to get too crazy with it.
Yeah, that's the first one I ever scored, because that was my best one that we were looking at there, the Euro, and it was just over 125. So that was interesting to me, because although it wouldn't net that, it wouldn't ever be Pope and Young in my head. It's like, all right, that's kind of a Pope and Young buck.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I definitely score almost every buck I kill, because I'm just curious. But I try not to like make it about that. I want to make it about the animal and about the experience. And I think, in my opinion, the biggest stat on a buck is his age. That's how I've kind of evolved, is I'm targeting the oldest bucks I can, and so that's the one that really interests me.
Do you send a tooth in for every deer?
Yep, I send them in to deerage.com.
Every single one?
Yeah. Yep. Now, well, for the most part, sometimes you forget and teeth get lost or stuff happens. Yeah. But I think almost every buck I've killed in the last like 10 plus years I've sent in. But that's a cool thing, because I like the animals and the biology just as much as like the hunting. I'm just always been into like biology and animals and how they interact and how they change. I'm just really fascinated by wildlife and whitetails in particular. So for me, that's like a huge thing. Like, part of it, I want to know how old he is, and then like I like to track these deer year to year. Yeah. And follow them, I'll say, and track them sometimes. But
look at their cam pictures year to year. Right?
Yeah, pictures or whatever. You learn about the animals and you start to realize they're all individuals and they do different things, and that's really interesting to me. So the age is just another layer of that, and I'm always like speculating on how old the deer is as I follow them year to year. And actually, when you send those teeth in, and after a while you start to build up like kind of like a library in your head or a knowledge, so you get better and better at knowing, like,
guessing deer's age.
Yeah, and especially for the particular areas that you hunt, like it's definitely different in different parts of the country. I've been fortunate to hunt pretty much all over the country for whitetails, so I've seen those regional differences, and it's just interesting to see the differences within the herd. I mean, there's obviously the different subspecies that you find, and they are different to an extent, and I see trends that, like, pretty consistently for different parts of the country that are really interesting, and you kind of see it over and over. And I don't think a lot of people are really too interested in that, maybe, but I am, so I pay attention to it.
It's definitely really cool. I mean, so I can see what you're saying. You build up all that knowledge in your head, and then you shoot a buck, and you can go up to it and say, "Well, that one looks like he's probably 6.5." Then you send in the tooth, and you can verify it.
Yeah.
If you're getting better and better at it, then your guess will be better.
We're
and better.
I mean, it's tough. I guess the toughest, in my opinion, the toughest thing to age a deer is when you have a buck that you don't know of that shows up, or it's a new spot, and you get a picture of a buck, and he's already fully mature, so like 5-6 years old. It's tough to age that deer. That deer could be 5 or he could be 10, and I think there's some regression of deer, like their musculature, their antlers as they get older, but I think it's super individual, or super specific to the animal. So I think there's some bucks that are 10 years old that are like as big as they ever have been. And there's some bucks that are 10 years old that are like, a shadow of their former self. So that's tough. So I say, our group has been pretty dang good at guessing or estimating age of the deer that we've hunted and shot over the past few years. Like we're almost spot on. Like we almost get it down to a year. Maybe we're a year off, but all the bucks we have history with or pictures of hunting, we're almost like certain how old they are, and then you send the teeth in and confirms it. And it's really cool, and then you can start to get pretty darn good at it. A lot of people don't think you can, and so there's always the outlier that you're going to be off on, but I think for the most part you can get pretty accurate with it.
So what's your preferred age then to start considering a buck that you want to shoot? Is it 5.5?
It depends on a lot. It depends where I'm hunting, and I think that probably is true for everybody. On my property that I own, that I live on, which is kind of in the southern part of the state, there's a lot more pressure around there. I don't spend as much time hunting it. I'd probably shoot a 4-year-old on that property. Mm-hmm. Maybe. Depends. Definitely a 5-year-old. If I get a 5-year-old there, I'm going to start to hunt them. If I usually don't prioritize that property. It's almost like a little experiment for me just to see what happens. So I hunt it, sporadically. But really, I feel like that my baseline gets older and older the more I hunt for deer. And it's and I think the reason for that is I've been seeing that in a lot of these bucks in the big woods in New Hampshire, and probably, I would suspect it's a lot of the country too, is that these bucks are continuing to get bigger and bigger the older they get. Like a lot of people say a 4-year-old is fully mature. I don't necessarily know if that's true anymore. I think it's probably 5 or 6. And I don't think that a lot of the bucks in New England are peaking antler-wise until they're 7, 8, 9 years old. That's what I've seen consistently. If you look at a lot of the biggest bucks, maybe not necessarily weight, but antler-wise, a lot of those are really old deer.
Yeah, it's weird.
And, you hear the bucks that are killed are in the 160s, 70s, 80s, and most of them are 8, 9, 10-year-old deer.
Yep.
And it seems like around here it takes that long for them to get to that size. They just have such a slow kind of burn and growth, whereas in the Midwest, you see a 4-year-old that maybe 170, 180. I think that's extremely rare in New England to see that.
Yeah, it's real weird. And Pat Burns' buck this year, that he sent the tooth out just recently, actually, I think last week. So he held on to it for a little while. But he thinks it's at least 11.5, could be 12.5. So that would put 2 years ago when it had its best rack.
Right, so
10.5 or 9.5.
Yeah, I've just seen it so consistently that there's no doubt in my mind. And then we track these deer, and I've seen them keep getting bigger every year they get away, to a certain point.
Yeah.
I think probably you better start hunting them when they're 7, 8, because they're gonna eventually someone else is gonna shoot them where they're gonna die, or they're gonna I bet all bucks, I'm sure, if they lived old enough, would regress in antler size and probably body size as well. But yeah, so I'd say right now, this sounds crazy, but I'd love to hunt every deer, get every deer to 6 or 7 before I start hunting, and that's I kind of I'd say 5 is probably when I start to think about it and start to hunt a little bit. But even the deer that I shot this year, he was a 6.5-year-old, and I knew he was probably at least that old.
The New Hampshire buck?
Yeah. And then the other I was after another one that was the same age, and I hunted him hard, but almost in the back of my head, I was like, man, I almost hope I don't see him and he makes it one more year, which is kind of a weird thought. But I'm also
I don't
weird
think
when it
that's
comes
weird.
to that
I think
stuff.
everybody thinks that.
Oh, I think in the perfect world, you let that deer live a super full life, you have a long journey with that deer, and the story keeps going, and you
kill him at 10.
Yeah, kill him when he's his biggest, and he's you've had the maximum experience, and he's hit his peak, and okay, it's time, and then you start another story. But it doesn't always happen like that. And if you waited to hunt him till then, you'd risk that. And even like buck I shot in 2019 was 8.5, and he scored the highest that year. I didn't have sheds off him, but other people had sheds off him the previous 2 years. But his frame had shrunk at 8. So I would suspect that he probably would have been starting to go down by 9, right? So he probably peaked at 7, 8, which I don't think's not abnormal at all, but he may have been on the front end where he peaked just a touch earlier. So
yeah, but still, that's like 7 or 8 peaking for most of the deer. Deer hunters in America, people that think they would say no, that's older than they're peaking at 5.5.
Well, I just don't.
In most places,
it is, yeah, no, it's like but here's the thing that we have to realize in the Northeast is most of that information, the media, everything is based on deer in the Midwest. So and that's true in the Midwest, but it's not necessarily true here. So. They're just different. Like, I just think that they don't have the nutrition and I don't know, probably the Midwest deer are genetically superior antler-wise as well, but like, they grow way faster, they get there faster, and their top end is higher, right? So you just get these, there's some deer in the Midwest that are 3.5 and are in the 170s. That's crazy. Like, I'm sure it's happened in New England, but like, man, that's like a 1 in a million deer. And it's probably 1 in a million deer out there too, but you get the point. So, when you're hunting him when you have this deer that like looks like he has potential and he's like 4 or 5, and I just start to, I wonder what he'll look like. I wonder what he's going to, it's not only what he's going to do. That's
definitely the thing. It's like when you see that they're having some really good potential, then you definitely you're like, wow.
But then they're the hardest to lay off because they're already pretty nice, right? So it's I've got past the point where those are the ones I want to see live. But the other thing that I think is interesting is just their behavior and how it changes as they age as well. That interests me just as much as what they're going to look like antler-wise, is like how their behavior changes. And I've seen that, and it's cool to monitor that.
What's the biggest changes that you're noticing?
I'm seeing a lot of, you hear this all the time, but like, seems like bucks get more habitual and their core shrinks as they get older. I have seen that to a degree for sure. But that's not anything new that that we don't already know.
You're not breaking that.
No. But the interesting thing I've seen is I think that now this is purely my theory, and I don't know. I haven't really dug into it much, but it seems like I'm seeing older deer changing their habits. In a particular area, when they say they've been doing the same thing for 3 or 4 years, and then all of a sudden they're just not there anymore. They're hardly there, or they disappear, and you don't think that they died, or maybe you get a picture of them somewhere else, but it's like, what happened? For so long he was doing the same thing. Why did he change at this age? I actually think that what's happening is those deer are like, they're like over the 50-year-old guy, right? That's like, I don't want to fight anymore. Like, I don't want to chase. I will fight if I have to. Like, I don't want to be out all night chasing girls. Like, I'm not going to turn one down, but like, but you get these younger deer that are like, 4, 5, 6-year-old bucks that are in maybe the breeding prime, right? I don't know, physically prime, and I think that they're just kind of pushing. They're starting to move into those prime areas that older buck occupied for so long, and maybe pushing them out. And they're kind of like avoiding those. They're still there, but they're not like the prominent, like big.
That older buck is like, look, I don't need to be around the cities and the suburbs anymore. I'm going to build a shack in the middle of the swamp out here, and just get away from all the riffraff.
I don't want to fight. I'm not interested. Like, I'll participate in the rut when I can without getting my butt kicked, but I'm not going to go crazy like I did when I was a 5-year-old. So
you still probably see him bust out everyone if there's like a fight going on, right? He'll bust out a little bit.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
Kind of like, and just gauge the reaction to show him he's still got it.
I think in general they're still gonna exhibit a lot of similar behavior, but they'll probably just kind of taper off their aggressiveness, their trying to display dominance in an area, which I feel like, a lot of areas will have one buck that's like the oldest mature buck, and, he's the one that's there the most, and it's kind of like his core. And I mean, I've heard that deer aren't particularly territorial, at least bucks aren't. I mean, they're aggressive towards other bucks, but they'll tolerate each other if there's enough space for them to kind of coexist. They're not going to try to run them out of the country. Obviously, during the rut, they're going to fight over hot doe, but I just think that those older bucks maybe start to just avoid other deer in general and aren't as tolerant of them. And then, if there's another mature buck in their range, they're just going to be like, yeah, whatever, you can have it. Just, it's all you, buddy. I'm going to go hang out up here and,
Well, so. It's pretty interesting. Like this year, there was a really big 9-pointer. It was the biggest buck I've ever had on camera that I was after, and I was hot onto him, and I was kind of in what I thought was his core, and I had avoided the whole stand, until I think it was November 4th. It was cold, and it was a good time to go in there. The wind was right, and I sat in the stand, and I rattled, and as soon as it was 15 seconds after I rattled, two probably 3.5-year-old bucks, but had decent racks on them. Yep. One was like a nice little 8, and one was a big 7, and they come smashing down the hill and fight. Like my rattle kind of got them started. Yep. They came down fighting. A spike horn charged down the hill after them, and he's just kind of watching them spar, and they're sparring 55, 60 yards away from me. And I'm just thinking, I'm like, that was cool. I just smashed those together, and they came down, and where's this 9-pointer? And I eventually, just out of the corner of my eye, I see movement, and he's just slowly walking in. He doesn't give a shit about the fighting. Like you were saying, he's just, like, he's kind of watching them fight. And I think he knew, like, wait a minute, what was that first rattle? Those two were just fighting, not really thinking about what made that noise and how come they don't see other deer fighting. But that 9-pointer who's older and big, knew exactly what was going on. He was like, well, let them fight, and I'm going to try to figure out what the hell that was that made that noise, and he didn't give me one shot.
I think those old deer just, they just want to be left alone. It's almost like they want to participate at like a baseline level, only do the minimum to like socially, and then, they've been around the block, they know the drill, and they don't want to turn it on until like it's time to turn it on. It seems like that's the big thing. Like the younger deer will go crazy and like, ripping up scrapes and like do all this stuff. And not that the old deer won't, they will, but I feel like they're just super calculated on like how they expend their energy and how they participate in like the rut or any sort of breeding. And so I bet when they fight, they're like, it's going down. Like they're going to break their damn antlers off or kill the other buck because they know that doe is ready to be bred, and this is the time. They have enough experience to know that this is go time. This is, when I have to go hard. But, you see that during the rut a lot of the time, the younger deer will be going harder or way earlier, and it's like the older ones just, no, not yet. Go ahead. I'll be there. Like I'll be there when it matters.
They know when they're going to have the highest chance of success, and they'll be able to rattle off 10 breeds in a week or something, right? And then they'll be done.
And they wait till the very end when it's perfect, and then they show up and boom, So I think they just learn how to survive, and probably that makes sense if they're going crazy for 6 weeks long running does. Their survival or their mortality is going to be not good.
I was out there today in my hour-and-a-half shed, and I was, whenever I see a hill, I try to run up it. So it's just so I can get it over with. I sprint to the top, and I was doing that, and I got pretty out of breath, and I was sitting there thinking, I was like, man, what? If I was a buck, how old am I? Am I fucking past my prime right now?
Probably not if you're doing that. I feel like a buck would take 20 minutes to go up.
How old do you think you are in buck years?
Oh, probably older than I should be.
You're probably at 5.5, 6.5.
I don't know. I feel like maybe older than that.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, I don't know. I want to be 5.5. I'm probably 6.5.
Yeah.
I'm probably getting near the downhill.
That's a good question. I never thought of that.
Just the funny shit you think about when you're out in the woods.
I'd probably like a 6-year-old.
But I'm past the time where I want to get into a bar fight.
No, I'm done with that.
You know what I mean? So.
No, I sometimes almost fantasize about the idea of fighting. When you're younger, you get into some things happen, and get into some fights or whatever happens. But nah, then you just like think about it, you're like, nah, I don't want anything to do with that at this point in my life. And I bet they're the same way, right? They probably feel that testosterone rising and the rut's coming, and then they're like, yeah, nah, you guys have at it, buddy. If I have to, I will, but I'm
save
good.
my antlers.
Yeah.
That's why a lot of those older bucks have perfect racks, though, too, because they're not.
Yeah, you get a lot of those 3 and 4-year-olds all busted up. Actually, I've seen that too. To be honest with you, I've seen a lot of the like middle-aged bucks have a lot of broken tines, whereas and you're like, oh man, I hope he doesn't bust his rack up again this year, and it's like, then he doesn't. He doesn't again. You're like, oh, that's weird. Like, I wonder what happened that year. Maybe he was just super aggressive. Yeah. Just like remember what you were like when you're 18. If you're a guy listening to this, right? You know how you felt. Yeah. It was like you just wanted to just go 1,000% on everything and just get yourself into trouble. So those are, in my mind, are like the 3-year-olds and the 4-year-olds of the deer woods. So I don't think it's super dissimilar.
Horse racing too, because like
I don't know anything about horse racing, but it's super interesting.
Horses are they're not too dissimilar from deer.
Oh yeah, sure.
Right?
Yeah.
They're whatever you call. I don't know. I'm not like a biologist, but they're in the same family or genus or something, right? And 3.5 is the year of maturity for horses. When that's all the big horse races, like the Kentucky Derby and the Preakness and all the big races. They're only 3.5-year-olds because that's when they're at their physical prime for fastest, athletic ability and stuff. And I think it's probably pretty similar.
Well, that makes sense.
They get stronger and they fill out. The horses do as they get older, and some horses will race until they're 10, 11 years old, and then they kind of retire and they just stud on a farm. But all the biggest, fastest, best races are for 3.5-year-olds.
I didn't know that. That's really
and then 4.5. It's some really nice ones too. So if you kind of relate back to that,
that's it. Yeah, and it probably has to do a lot with obviously their expected lifespan of the animal, right? Like they're not the same family. Obviously, they're canines, but we used to race sled dogs. And, like a 3 to 5-year-old dog was like prime for racing. He was the fastest, best endurance, most drive too. That's a big thing, obviously, mentality. So they were really like puppies until they were 3. And then when they were 3, it was like they're in their prime and you're going to get like 2, 3, 4 good years out of them before they start to slow down and have less drive and all that stuff. So, yeah, I think that's like that with probably a lot of species.
Yeah, and it's also like when you go to buy a horse in that whole part of the industry, it's like if you're buying them as a yearling when they're 1 year old, when they're 1, they're cheaper because you don't see
you have to wait a year till they're
and you can't really see their potential.
Oh, okay,
but when they're 2, now you kind of know like, oh, that horse. And I don't know how they even judge it. I'm not in that, but I did own 3% of a racehorse once.
Oh, did you?
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Which was fun. But when they're 2, you can be like, all right, that's a $250,000 horse because he's on his way to be a champion, and it's for sure. So I think similar with bucks too. Like yearlings, you might get an outlier that's got like an 8-point or a small 6-point rack as a yearling, and most of them are spikes, and then you don't really see what's going to happen.
Catch up. I think you have to really. It's on a curve, obviously, but those younger deer, some of them you can see the potential in them right away, but some of the late fawns that are born late are just going to be spikes, and but they may have Boone and Crockett potential, but they were just born late, right? So it might take longer for them to get there. Or some deer get there faster, and it's like I think a lot of the deer around, like I said, a lot of the deer around here are getting there later than the Midwest. I mean, it's not uncommon to see like a 5x5 in the 1.5 in the Midwest. I mean, I can actually think of one on a farm I hunted in Kentucky. I saw him actually the first time I ever hunted the farm was 1.5. He was like a 100-inch 10-pointer.
Really?
Yeah.
Holy
and then
crap, that's a big deer.
At 2, he was 135, 140-inch. Wow. 10 or 11, and then like my buddy ended up. Actually, I hunted that. I almost shot him 2 years ago. I hunted that. I didn't even. It's funny. He was so. That was such a long period of time in that farm. I forgot it was the same deer. But I hunted him in 2020 and almost killed him the first week of bow season. But my buddy killed him later in the year. It was like a 168-inch 6x6.
As a 3.5?
No, he was like 6 at that point.
Okay,
yeah, and we thought he was gonna be even bigger than that because he was so big. younger, but he had like a really tight rack, so just not a high score. A super impressive looking deer. Once again, like that score. I mean, that's a big score. Don't get me wrong, but like for Kentucky in that area, we thought he was going to actually be bigger, but once again, like the score didn't really do him justice because he was super heavy and stacked with tines, and just not.
Yeah, it's like John Moulton was here, and if you go look at that podcast, he was showing these 2 different deer, and the one he got this year was like 142 inches or something. It was long tines, long mean beams, but kind of spindly, and then he had a shed of 2 shed, like a set of this really thick, just super mass, way more impressive buck that scored less.
It happens all the time.
He's more impressive
all the time. I mean, it's just the score is not it's just one thing, right? Like, I mean, even the deer I killed this year he scored okay, but like, just when you hold that rack, and it's like a heavy buck, right? Like it's just, he has heavy beams, and it's just like, this is a substantial set of antlers, and he's not like a 160-inch deer or anything like that, but it's just like, this is pretty impressive. And I remember when I got up on that deer, I was like, oh, this is a pretty big, mature buck. Like, I knew he was, but it's just like until you get your hands on it.
It's also, like you said, the size, even the size of the head is going to add a lot of weight, right?
For sure. Yeah, I mean,
is that one of the things you judge when you're trying to age a deer? Is the size? He's got a big head. He's got a long.
100%. Yeah. It's mostly the shape. This is hard for me to.
Do you score bear skulls too?
Yeah. Yeah. I haven't scored a ton of bear skulls. I'm not really. I've never shot a bear. I don't know why I haven't had I actually might shoot one this September because I finally kind of talked myself into shooting one. I just haven't really had a desire to do so, and I feel like when bear season starts, I'm always like at level 10 to get ready for deer season. So it's like, I don't care about bears right now. Deer season starts in 2 weeks.
That's where I'm at with turkeys.
Oh yeah.
A lot of people.
A lot of people stay like that because your deer hunting will suffer if you become a turkey.
That's what I'm saying.
That's what happened to me.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And so many people are like, stop the turkey shaming, and my buddy Chris, he's just like, stop with the turkey shaming, dude. I'm like, no, I'm gonna keep shaming
the turkey.
Turkeys.
Yeah, I always say the biggest flaw in my deer game is that I get addicted to turkey hunting for 2 months a year. It absolutely is. Like, because the problem with where I live is like we don't lose, or where I hunt actually, we don't lose snow till like almost the end of April. Now it's turkey season. I'm not doing. I mean, there's a lot of scouting that I could be doing and learning that I'm not because I'm chasing turkeys, and it's like, but I can't. I just like it's funny when that turkey switch flips. It's like I black out and don't think about deer for like 8 weeks. It's the weirdest thing. And then the second it's over, I'm like, okay, back to deer. And like that's it until the next turkey season. And people are going crazy about turkeys right now. And it's like, I'm like, stop. I'm like, I can't do this right yet. Like, just stop. Like, I don't even, like John actually sent me a video that we're putting out tomorrow of a hunt I had in Kentucky just to kind of look through it and proof it or whatever before it goes on the YouTube channel. And, I told him, like, you gotta stop. I gotta stop watching these. I'm just gonna tell you to put them up and not watch them because like I'm starting to get jacked up for turkeys, and I'm like, it's February, I can't do that yet. And then we're heading down south in like a month to hunt too. So I'm like, I'm not even ready for that almost. It's like I'm gonna even when it happens, I'm almost like still trying to resist going into turkey mode. So yeah, don't get bitten by the turkey bug. You'll be fine.
Just why is it? And it's got to be something so simple. It's probably just the interaction with the turkeys. And I'm going to keep turkey shaming because I'm kind of be a bully on turkeys because I don't want to get into it because I know I only have so much time. I know I got to juggle family priorities.
100%. Then
and if
don't do it.
And I am enjoying shed hunting now. So it's kind of like trading, like, if I got into turkeys, it's just it's going to take away from the deer hunting grace periods, I guess.
For sure. Yeah. And it's, I think there's a couple reasons. So, I was an athlete growing up. Was my whole life. I played baseball through college, and that was like all I did. And
I played baseball too.
Okay.
Were you a third baseman?
No, I was an outfielder. But
we all turn into third baseman as we get older.
You only have a step and a dive. That's as far as you have to go. So I sometimes don't like that. Well, I think so. It's kind of twofold. So our style of hunting and my style of hunting is I mostly bow hunt and stand hunt up until probably the third week in November. Obviously, I mean, for some people it works great. I just don't have the personality to be on the ground with a bow, so I'm in a stand. And then we get into this dates in November, and I just feel like I have such a better shot at killing some of these old deer that I have not patterned, but patterned to an extent, annual patterns rather than like, week to week type pattern stuff. But I feel like I have a way better shot sitting in a stand during the peak of the rut to kill some of these deer after than I would still hunting or tracking. So I'm like in a stand from September 1st until probably like Thanksgiving. And then that period is over, and then now I'm probably trying to track, because I'm sick of sitting in the stand by now, and I've sat so many hours. So I don't really, and a lot of guys are on the ground all the time. They're super mobile. They're still hunting even with a bow, and they prioritize like that over sitting in a stand in November. So it's almost like I get that physical fix, that physical activity with out for turkeys because, and I do not sit in blinds to hunt turkeys. I hate that. I can sit on a tree for like 5 minutes and I want to move. So I'm not a patient turkey hunter, but I still, you don't have to be super patient to kill turkeys if you figure out, the game. But, so that's where I get that interactive stuff, and the physical stuff. I love that. The other thing is, deer hunting for a lot of people is a solitary
that's
thing.
True.
And turkey hunting, I get to hunt with a bunch of people, and I love the social aspect of it.
And that's probably what's so good about waterfowl too, which is another thing I just haven't got into and don't really want to get that bug either.
I mean, that's one of my favorite things is I talk to all these people about deer hunting, but like how often do I actually get to spend time in the woods with those people? Not very often at all.
Yeah.
Turkey season I get to, so that's why I like it as well. And it's just a lot of action, and we run around and hunt all over the dang place, and it's just really fun. It's like an adventure every day.
Yeah.
Like we might start the morning in one state and end up like 5 hours away in the other state, because we don't know like what. Yeah. Oh, our tag's filled here. Hey, look, we still have time. You can hunt till past noon in Maine. Let's go to Maine, and then we go to Maine, and like where in Maine? I don't know. Let's just drive and we'll talk about it on the way up. And hey, there's a bird on a power line or whatever. We're gonna go after him. Like
I can definitely get behind that. The social part of it and all that is probably the best part, because what I get fixated on is like, how can you get excited to shoot something that just looks the same?
That's
much.
not.
Like they
that's
all
not it.
look the same.
No, you're right. Yeah, they 100% do. And I think the other is like the interaction with the bird is really cool when you actually get into like the kind of the technical. It's almost like an art of calling a turkey. I mean, they're pretty simple animals, but it takes experience and some technique to actually call them to your gun, where and it's fine, everybody turkey hunts differently, but like, and I used to be like this, but a lot of guys are like deer hunters that just shoot turkeys. They're not really like hardcore turkey hunters, which I get. I used to be that.
I think if I turn into turkey hunting, that'll be me.
Yeah, and that's fine. And I was like that for a long time, and then I don't know, something clicked, and I just was like, there's nothing like calling a bird in the timber, to your gun barrel, having them hammering coming in, and that's really cool. That's another thing that I really enjoy.
It does make for
is
some
that
pretty
aspect.
awesome filming and footage too.
Yeah, it's fun, and it's just fun. It's just a different thing, and it's like, to me, it's pure fun, and it's like, and we have some really good turkey hunting in New England, so that's cool to capitalize on that opportunity. That guys from down south that are like crazy turkey hunters, like they can't believe how good it is up here, and they want to come up and.
Was it you guys? Your channel? And by the way, if people don't know, it's Just Hunt Club.
Yep, Just Hunt Club is our YouTube channel.
Awesome channel. I think it's the best hunting channel in the Northeast, and probably one of the biggest, or if not the biggest. Yeah. I mean, it's really good semi-live stuff. But I'm trying to remember if it was I watched one turkey because it was in Killington, Vermont, or Pico. Somebody was hunting way high, and it was awesome. I can't remember if it was you guys.
I haven't hunted either of those mountains, but I have hunted turkeys. Yeah, maybe I wasn't on either of those mountains, but I did. Well, you said that. I didn't know if someone said, "Oh, I'm on Killington" or whatever. I
can't remember if they did or not.
No, yeah, may have been me. I've killed man, we've had a lot of good hunts on ski mountains throughout almost anywhere where ski mountains are. Right?
Yeah.
Well, it's like a field, right? Yeah. But there's not many people want to hike up there.
Yeah. To
shoot a turkey, and like, why do I want to hike up there when I can just go shoot one in my backyard because they're there every day? And it's like, but it's the experience and it's the social aspect, and you get up there. And it's, if they run, that'd be sweet. But we've done that. That's one of my favorite hunts. I think we're gonna try to do a ski mountain or two again this year, but we've done it like 3 or 4 different times. It's really a fun experience. Usually we camp out up there, which is cool.
Yeah.
Just go up and most of those mountains are public land, or at least a portion of them are. They're almost all public access. So you get some funny looks from some hikers sometimes. You're like, what the hell are you doing up here with a gun and can't? Like they're like, what? So, it's not. It's you're good to go. Yeah.
Do you ski at all or anything?
I used to ski. I don't anymore. I actually blew up my knee, and about a decade ago, and had it surgically reconstructed. Like tore everything. So I get real nervous about skiing with my knee because I want to maintain it so I can still hunt. And I'm just like, anything that I may compromise my knee, like I don't want to risk it. So I just kind of like pick and choose what I do. And sometimes I hunt a lot in the mountains, and if I don't have my knees junk, like I'm kind of screwed for a lot of the stuff we do. So I try to baby that thing as much as I can.
It's true. Yeah, my wife got me into it like 3 years ago. I'd never skied. I grew up in Vermont, right down the road from Killington. Never skied.
Yeah, it's fun.
I got into it. And, I'm loving it. And but you're right. Yeah, it takes some wipeouts, and as you get older.
Yeah, I mean it. Yeah, I don't know. I'd probably be fine, but I don't know. I just like. I'd be real pissed at myself if I blew out my knee skiing and couldn't hunt for a year or two, or that's not an option in my mind. So
how'd you blow your knee out when you did?
Oh, it was not even any. Let me think of a cool story that sounds better. No. I was out in Boston one night. Actually got done came out of Fenway Park at a Red Sox game. Was just messing around with a buddy and jumped off a stairwell that was like a couple stairs too long to comfortably jump off, and realized right as I'm jumping, that's a little too far down to just be jumping off. Like I was kind of jogged up to it, and I got to the edge and didn't think it was as deep down, and was like, oh shit. And so and I was like, well, I'm either gonna try to stop myself and tumble down this thing in this weird awkward thing, or I could just try to make it. And I did, but when I landed, landed on my knee, and it locked. Just tore everything, and it wasn't a good deal.
LCL, ACL. MCL,
yeah, it was LCL, MCL, PCL, tore my meniscus, and fractured my tibia. The only thing I didn't do was the ACL, so it was pretty. It sucked, and it still bothers me to this day, and I'm just kind of pissed that I did that because it. I mean, I used to I still do to an extent, but I used to run a lot more and do trail running, and it's it's tough for me because I get to a point where it's I do it too much, too consistently, and it just starts to really bother me, and I have to tone it back, so it kind of sucks.
But. Yeah, it reminds me of a freaking spring break in college, playing drunk volleyball, dude, and separated my AC joint in my shoulder, diving for. And got nerve damage. So this shoulder's pretty, it's weak. It's weaker than this one, which for bow hunting kind of sucks. It's hard for me to do lat raises with this one because of that.
What else do I tore my labrum as well on my throwing arm in college. So that kind of sometimes bothers me too. I never got it repaired.
Yeah.
I had actually several teammates had the same injury, and they had surgery, got it repaired, then immediately retore it as soon as they rehabbed, and had to go through the surgery. I know one guy that went through it 3 times, and I was like, I think I'm good with trying to go through it. And it was 8 months in a sling to tear it 2 months after you're out of the sling, and it was I'm good. So I struggled through that, but luckily I've been pretty good drawing my bow and haven't had that many issues with it over the years. It's been pretty good.
What do you shoot for a bow?
We're working with PSC this year. I worked with them. We didn't really work with them last year, but I shot a PSC last year. So I'm shooting. Last year I shot their carbon bow. I think I'm going to again. Actually, I have the Levitate in the truck. It's a pretty sweet bow. Their new one. I think
I shot that.
Have you? Yeah.
I think I shot that. Whatever their newest.
Yeah.
Real nice bow is.
Yep.
The carbon one.
Yeah,
and,
they're the lightest. They're so light, it's crazy. It's almost it's perfect for what I do because I'm always trying to cut weight. That's my big thing. I just hate excess and extra stuff. So I really like that idea. And then I don't know, it's funny because the first deer I ever shot was with a PSC, so it's cool to kind of come back to it. But it seems like the last couple of years have really stepped up. I think their technology and their bows. They seem I don't know. I mean, obviously I'm working with them, so, but at the same time, that bow that I shot last year. I mean, it might have been my favorite bow I've ever shot. It was an awesome bow. And it's I think PSC for a while got not a great reputation like amongst some hunters, but it seems like they've turned the corner, and I'm really impressed with their new stuff. But anymore, any top end bow is awesome. Like, you can't go wrong with any of the top brands. They all make great bows. This is kind of personal preference, and
Yeah, I'm still so new into archery. Like, I only really got into it 3 years ago. Like, seriously got into it. And I'm still shooting the same bow that I bought 6 years. I bought one 6 years ago. It was
works fine too.
Bowtech carbon icon, and it was carbon. So
they made a carbon bow.
That's the only bow I've ever. And it's super light. Anytime anyone holds it, they're like, "Holy shit, that's light!" And I've loved it.
Bring in that one I got. It's like, it's silly.
Yeah, you should.
It's silly light, but it's almost to the point where, well, it's good because when you actually put like a sight on it and a rest and a quiver, whatever you're gonna put on a stabilizer. It's still pretty light, which is some of these bows that if they're not at a baseline super light and you put all that stuff, they get kind of heavy. But these things are so light that it's like you put I don't know if this is going to be a video podcast, but you put like, an accessory on one side of the bow and you hold it and it starts to go like this because there's not enough, there's not much mass on the actual bow itself. So the accessory is such a high percentage of the weight that it kind of, so I run a sidebar on mine and it balances it. It's still lighter with the sidebar than most bows, and it balances really well, and it's pretty awesome. Holds well on us.
Yeah, so I think this is the first year I'm going to get a new bow. Like that bow, I didn't know anything because I'd never shot anything else. And it's done fine for me. I've never had any issues except for keep holding back. The let off didn't seem that great, and I don't know if something was messed up with the way it was tuned or something, but I brought it down.
Maybe a cam timing, or even so I think a lot of
it's insane, dude. I shot a new Matthews. I shot the new all of them. It was just like, it was night and day.
It's funny. I actually don't like super high let off bows. I like to be holding a little more weight. Like that PSC I have and the one I shot last year has a 90% let off if you want it, and I don't like that at all.
What do you do, 80?
Yeah, 80 or even less if I can. I'm probably 80 now is what I'll do. The bow I have, it's their carbon, their Mach 1, that was at 80% let off. And actually, when I was tuning, I had a lot more success with arrow flight when I backed just down to 80%. I shoot with a lot of back tension, so I'm pulling against the wall. So like that 90%, I don't feel it anyway because I'm already holding that weight, so it doesn't make much of a difference. I'm pulling against a string at the back wall. So if it's 70 or over, it really makes no difference. Even if it's 90% and I have to hold 1 pound, I'm still going to be pulling like 7, 8, 9 pounds against the back wall, so I'm pulling it anyway. It doesn't matter. It seems like it's less finicky, that cam. So I think the problem or the theory, from what I understand it, is when you have that high let off, you have like a really distinct valley. And so when you release that arrow, it takes longer for that cam to rotate and that string to get out of there. Mm-hmm. And so the longer it's here, the more impact you can have on that string with your release or your face or whatever you're doing. And then also, as that cam's starting to like load up and take out of the slack, potentially you have torque in your front hand too.
Lots of stuff could go wrong.
Yeah, so the least time that arrow is, from the second it's released that it's on the string, the better. If it's on the string longer, more stuff.
It's almost like a flintlock muzzleloader. How?
Yeah, the delay, right?
There's a delay where you can move and shit can go wrong.
Some of these 90, I'm not like I've heard this. I haven't seen it myself, but some of them almost like you have to push them to let down. And then I've even heard of some that if you put it at full draw and hang the bow, it will just stay at full draw hanging from the D-loop because the weight of the bow is heavier than the holding weight of the bow, which is crazy.
That is crazy.
So yeah, I mean, it's good for some people though because they don't like a lot of holding weight, and if you can draw a little bit more weight,
my shoulders are bad, so I could only hold my bow for probably 7 seconds.
Right, so that's probably good for you for that. And it just depends on preference, right? Everybody has a preference on what type of bow and how they set it up and arrows and whatever. And so you just, I think, do what works for you and what you feel comfortable with and what you have success. And honestly, the biggest thing is just confidence in your setup. That's the number one thing.
I've had confidence in it until I shot that new Matthews and all the new bows. I was super confident in it until that, and now I'm gonna get a new one.
It seems like there's definitely improvements in technologies in bow. Year to year, I think it's difficult to see an appreciable difference between the technology. But if you stack up 5 or 6 years, you can start to see differences over that. It takes a longer period of time though. But everybody comes. There's a lot of marketing stuff. People come with, if every company's got a new bow, it's faster, it's smoother, it's quieter, it's this, it's that, and like it probably is, but probably marginally than the year before or the other brand or whatever. So, I think that a lot of these companies make really good bows, but I have been enjoying shooting the PSC carbons and hunting with them for the last year. So. Yeah.
The biggest difference is going to be that Matthews is so much heavier than this carbon icon that I have.
Yeah.
I'll have to show you that too. It's just
and a heavy bow isn't like necessarily a bad thing either.
It's not,
for some
but
people.
I do walk around. I'm a ground. I like ground half the time. I like being on the ground, and I walk a lot. So it's just
same thing for us. I mean, if we're going, not everything we hunt's in the mountains. Obviously, like in Alberta, we're hunting field edges a lot of the times, but in Canada or whatever. But
So
if we're in the mountains, like. I want light.
Yeah,
light is awesome.
Let's talk about Alberta. I think that's cool. I'd love to get up into Canada. I mean, I've hunted in Anacostia, is the only place I've been.
Did you hunt up there?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I've gone there 3 years. My uncle started going there, and he loves it. It's an expensive
lots of opportunity,
hunt.
Right?
Lots of opportunity.
Deer,
If I go, I've only ever brought my rifle, but if we go again, I'll bring my bow because there is a lot of opportunity.
It's like a lot of like still hunting too, right? Is that my understanding?
Yeah, it's all pretty much all still
hunting.
That's cool.
Yeah,
but they have little shooting cabins if you want to do that. But I like sneaking around.
That's cool. Canada's awesome. If you can get
in like the bow zone or something they call it, right?
Yeah.
What is that?
The bow zone. Well, there's two actually in and it's in Alberta. There's two in Alberta. There's one around Calgary and one around Edmonton. And basically what it is a 30-mile radius around each city that, back in the 70s, the provincial government or whatever made it illegal to hunt with firearms for safety reasons. Mm-hmm. Although when you go to when you get 20 miles away from Edmonton, it's like there's not. You're in the middle of nowhere. There's nothing out there. So it's like what? But whatever. I mean, but the benefit is it's allowed deer on average to get older and and get bigger. And not that they don't get old and big outside the bow zone. Yeah, it's really neat. And I actually hunt kind of on the edge of it, so it's like some of the guy that I hunt with he's got some properties to hunt in the rifle zone in the north and. There's still great big bucks up there too as well. It's not like a huge difference, but they, on average, are just a little bit older, which means a little bit bigger in that bow zone. And that the whole bow zone is there's a few rivers that run through it too, so it's really good ag ground. And those rivers extend out of it too, but it's got a lot going for it right there. It seems like it's there's no wolves in at least in that. I don't think in Calgary either, but definitely no wolves in the Edmonton bow zone. And as you get further up into the bush, in central and I'd say northern Alberta, you run into wolves, and that becomes a serious issue. And just the food isn't there. So the bow zone is pretty heavy agricultural, but it's kind of a good mix of like big woods and agriculture. It's kind of a cool area. And the deer are just like the biggest in the world. So you can't, and they're just like a different class of animal, like just the size of them. And
so are they bigger in Alberta than Saskatchewan, or is it just like is it like a statistical fact or?
Bigger in those two places, or which?
I don't know. I've
bigger?
always heard like Saskatchewan's Are you just saying like Canada?
So,
that area?
Yeah, it's probably more that area of Canada. I think the bow zone specifically because it has that restriction probably has some of the biggest deer in Canada.
Yep.
Although the interesting thing is native people that can qualify as a native up there. I think it's called Métis. They can actually hunt with a rifle in the bow zone, which is interesting. So you have some. I don't think it's a huge issue, but you do have some, and they can even hunt. This is wild, but they can hunt year round, and they can hunt at night.
I've heard
with
that.
a rifle.
They can do whatever they want.
Yeah, so it's like that's wild, but it is what it is.
First Nations.
Yep. So but that I think, and the other thing is the soil in that area is actually really good. I mean, the agriculture is good, and so they're getting, the nutrition of the Midwest. I think they have genetics that I think are. As good as anywhere else. But in average, I think they're just bigger deer because they have to be because they live so far north. I mean, the winters, they don't get the snow like we do, but it's way colder up there. It's like 40 below all the time, and it's brutal. So
so it's like the Midwest, but northern.
Yeah.
So you get the rack size plus freaking huge bodies.
Yeah, huge bodies.
Yeah, the video, it looks really cool, man. Like
it's a cool
it
place.
Looked extremely intriguing just watching that video.
I love hunting up there. I'm not super interested in the Midwest anymore. I did that a lot, and I experienced it. It was really a cool experience, and I met a lot of people, made a lot of friends. I do hunt out there probably every year, especially in Ohio, because I have really good friends that have a bunch of ground out there. So I'll hunt out there, but like the Midwest doesn't intrigue me like it used to. I'm more interested in like the northern whitetail type stuff, like in New England or in Canada. So, you know, I just think it's one of the coolest settings to hunt whitetails up there. I love it. It's just the whole thing.
Season starts September 1st.
September 1st, which is really awesome. Cool. Yeah, you can hunt bucks and velvet, which is something I always really wanted to do. Well, I had done, but.
Well, for anybody that hasn't seen it, you've got to go watch his Just Hunt Club video. Was it an 11-pointer that velvet buck this year?
It's 5x6,
huge, wide out to here.
Yeah, he was just so wide. It was like
awesome footage.
Stupid. It was very weird when I was like, we were taking pictures of them and I was looking at them. And I was like, I can't send that to somebody because it doesn't look real. It looks like that doesn't look right. And I was like, how do I was almost trying to make the deer look smaller so it looked like real. But like, I mean, he was 27 it's 27 plus inches inside spread.
So
like legit. Like I'm not I'm a scorer. I'm not just saying that. Like he legit was. It's just so wide. I mean, he didn't have super long beams or anything, but he kind of just went out. But he just looked so.
And the one thing that's fake. Smaller on velvet for score would be the inside spread.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah,
he'd probably be 28.
He was fine without that. But yeah, he's just a really impressive deer. He was 8.5, which was awesome.
Do you weigh those bucks up there?
They don't weigh them, and I would have tried to weigh them just because I'm super curious. But it was September. It was not cool out, or not cool out.
Yeah.
So it was like the meat was a concern, and just trying to get them cooled off and like taken care of. So I don't know. I know that I did. I was like, I wish I got a weight because it's the biggest deer I've ever killed, body and antlers. Like it's clearly bigger than body wise. Even in September, then
you said he was 6.5.
8.5.
Oh, he was 8.5.
Yeah. But I like got so much deboned meat off them that I like couldn't bring it all back in the cooler. I had to leave some there, and I did like the math, and it was like, I don't know, it came out that he was like, of course this is super rough estimate, it was like 250 to 270, 100 pounds, dressed or whatever. So he was, and that's a September 1st year, so I can't imagine what he would have weighed as he continues to gain weight and eat throughout September, October, where he's peaking for the rut. And
he's a giant, man.
It was just a huge deer, just an impressive animal. But that's not uncommon in that area. They just get huge. I mean, I saw one a few days before on the same property that I think had a bigger body.
Was that the one that was kind of tight rack, big? You sent me 2 pictures when you were going up there.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't that one. It was.
That one looked like a beast too.
Yeah, that thing he's alive and he's around. But that deer, no, he didn't have a huge rack. He was had heavy rack and like a bunch of trash on his bases, crazy brows, but just kind of like when he got up to his beams, just kind of petered out.
Yeah.
But his body was just enormous, and I saw him like the first or second night I hunted, which was cool to watch. That buck, he came out and
was he on the footage?
Yep. Yeah, it was kind of that should have been there. He worked a scrape. He was out there a bit, like 150, 200 yards, but we watched him, and that's the other cool thing. It's like you get to watch these bucks behave, the way, well, they probably behave like that here, but you just can't see them because it's so forested and dense, but like you can observe them because there are big fields. We were hunting alfalfa and clover mostly on the buck I killed, but they're not super nocturnal. They'll move in daylight, like out in the field, because that's what they're used to, and they don't really get a lot of pressure for the most part, just kind of bow pressure. So, and it seems like bow hunters up there are more cautious about their approach, obviously, than a gun hunter. So yeah, I love going up there. It's not cheap. I'll say that. It's not a cheap trip, but it's one that's like just, man, I just absolutely love it. And I save for it so I can do it almost. I mean, I've been up there, and it's not easy. That's the other thing that you got to realize. Like, it's not easy because their bucks behave more like our bucks in the big woods, where they aren't on like a particular farm every day. Even in September, they have these bigger loops that they make, so they'll come through an area like once every 3, 4, 5 days type of thing. So like the buck we were hunting wasn't even there for like the first 3 days. We were after him, we didn't see him. We were seeing other bucks, and then it was like day 4, boom, he was there, and like we saw him the morning before I killed him, got pictures of him the evening before I killed him. Couldn't get in there because the wind was wrong, and then we went in the next night and he was right there. But like he was kind of doing these loops too, and they're super cautious as well. They're big old deer, and they're actually a more cautious like deer than maybe even like a Midwestern deer. Like they're just like when that deer come out, the one I shot, he came in like the most secluded, or came out in the most secluded back corner cove of this field, and like stood with like 2 feet out in the field, just looking for like 10 minutes at 40 yards. And I'm like sitting there like it's clipped on, like, come on, like let's come out. And he just stood there and just surveyed. And then finally when he thought it was safe, he walked out. But yeah, it's a cool.
It's probably because it's in their DNA or genes or whatever, because even though there might not be wolves there now,
right?
Their
population, their strain has been hunted by wolves, and there's cougars up there too.
Yeah, so
they're
mountain
lions,
more cautious than these deer down here.
Ton of coyotes. Yep. Yeah, I would imagine that's probably, and I hear that about a lot of those western bigwoods, like Washington, northern Idaho, and like northwestern Montana. Those deer get hunted by wolves, and I hear they're like super cautious. So that is probably one of the benefits we have, is we don't have wolves, or really, if we have mountain lions, not a huge population or resident population. Although the coyotes, I think, man, I've been getting a lot of coyote pictures on my cameras lately, and pictures of them chasing deer, which is kind of concerning. More so than.
Did you see the video that I posted?
I did see that. That's wild.
It was a buck.
Do you think that he was injured before the coyotes got to him, or do you think that
as I'm thinking about it more and more, I think he probably slipped on the ice and broke his legs, or splayed out and tore something, and then the coyote. But I don't know. Yeah. It looked like I saw where it looked like the first blood was drawn, and it looked like he came down over the bank, so they might have chased him out onto it. But I don't know how. I guess they could have broke his legs, but his legs were splayed out both sides. Coyotes, can they? I'm sure they can break the legs, right? But
I don't know. They're I think by and large they probably don't take down too many mature deer, but I think that they definitely do. I think that it happens.
And if they're going to do it on ice, is the only that's where they're going to do it.
We got a picture I'll show you real quick. I think we actually posted it. Here it is. But this is at least a 5-year-old buck. This was a few months. Well, it was December 27th. But look at that. That's a picture I got on one of my cameras.
That's a great
cell
picture.
Camera. And what it is a mature buck, like chasing a coyote off.
Chasing the coyote
like he's
off, yeah.
2 feet. I mean, what I assume happened right before that picture was, that coyote snuck up and tried to bite him in the butt, and he. But I think that if you're to the point where they're in that close proximity and he's trying to chase a coyote off, like that's probably not a good situation. Like I don't know that a deer made it. That's the last time I've got pictures of him. I haven't been up there because it's way up, as you can. It's
there's
on a mountain
deep snow.
And there's deep snow, so I'm kind of unfortunately thinking I'm going to find a skeleton of that buck when next time I go up in there, at some point. But they've been. Seems like the coyote population is growing, and it's becoming a bigger and bigger issue in this area. So.
I woke up 3 a.m. a few nights ago to just a whole pack yipping.
Really?
Yeah, and I don't know what they were. I mean, could have been breeding.
Yeah, it's getting about that time of year for them, I think.
Yeah.
I think like March is their big, late February, March. I'm not sure the exact
But woke up the whole neighborhood. My neighbor across the street the next morning was like, "Did you hear that?" I'm like, "Yeah." And everybody over there, they all woke up to it. I mean, it was super loud. And I get pictures all the time of 4 or 5 in a pack.
Yeah, it's concerning, especially this time of year where I'm at. I mean, do you have much? I didn't even notice. Do you get much snow here?
It started melting today pretty much, but there's been a lot of snow for 20 inches or so.
Okay, so that's tough on them when you get the deep snow, especially when you get the situation where the deer are punching through and the coyotes can run on the top. That's just not good.
Well, that's today. Yeah, this morning.
Yeah.
I was walking on top of the crust because it rained yesterday and kind of melted a little bit, and then was freezing overnight, and it was just super, super solid crust.
Yeah, that stresses me out seeing that stuff. I wish I could go do something about it, but I just have no time in the winter to trap, especially in the mountains. Like, how am I going to run I don't have time. I would have to do that full time if I was going to make any impact on the coyote population. I just can't. But it kills me running these cells, and I just get these freaking pictures of all day a coyote just cruising around. Well, yeah, because you know what they're doing.
That's the only thing that can kill your bucks that survived now.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
In a bad winter, but it's
right. Yeah, and I'm like, and I do have a couple that should be really good next year that were like, oh please, and they made it through. And I even to shedding their antlers. I know pretty darn sure we got pictures of them with antlers and then shed out. So, but the coyotes have been in there bad. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But it seems like most of them make it, but I know some do.
Yeah.
Do succumb to the.
Well, I found a deadhead. I found a deadhead 2 days ago, a 10-pointer on an island surrounded by swamps. There's like 3 or 4 islands and nice swampy area, and it was in a sanctuary. I was just shed hunting. You can't hunt in there anyway, so it wasn't not like I was scouting. And I got out to this island because the swamps were frozen over because it was really cold, and that's the only way I was ever going to go out there is over the ice.
That is the one nice thing about the winter. You can get to places in swamp areas. It's like,
so I've always been looking at this on a map, and I'm like, I want to go check it out.
Yeah. But you can't hunt it, and it's a pain in the ass to get to, so whatever.
But I went, and it's a real small, maybe like 4 or 5 acre island, you know.
Yeah.
But there was a deadhead there, and I don't know if coyotes got them. It was from this year. He still had,
really?
Yep, still had fur. But I was thinking probably, it could be a hunter got shot, but he would have had to travel a while because it was in like a 500 acre sanctuary.
Really? Yeah,
you can't hunt
unless them. Well, there's some people that do that. I've heard of plenty of that.
Exactly.
This area,
that could have happened.
It seems like I've heard a lot that. And I've seen it to an extent, too. A lot of those bucks will go back to their bed where they feel safe when they're injured and die there. And that's why you find a lot of dead bucks in bedding areas or, perceived bedding arears. So,
So let's talk your New Hampshire hunting strategy real quick.
Yeah.
What are you looking for now? I know, like, a lot of your footage, you guys, I see Ross hunting over these swamps, which are awesome looking, dude. Do you guys hone in on those high swamps, those boggy areas?
That's a great. So, I mean, I feel like swamps fit Ross's personality better and the mountains fit mine better. So it works out nice. But I think swamps are probably a really safe bet to find mature deer anywhere in the country, really. I mean, if you look at it, like water and swampy areas are great. We do look for that a lot. I think that's a great thing to key in on, even if like you're in an area that has no logging or it's all mature growth, but you find a swamp, that's an opportunity for a habitat change or an edge that you wouldn't have in thousands of acres of mature timber. So those are great things to focus on. I think that it's tough to say, but I think if I had to my life depended on finding a mature buck, I'd probably look for a swamp first. That's probably what I'd do.
If you had a week to sit?
Yeah, something like that. And I didn't know about the area. But I just don't like swamps. I always say this. They're not, I don't like the wet, swampy, it's just, I mean, I hunt them, don't get me wrong. Kill deer in them, but it's I'd like to go up high. Just something about being up on a mountain to me is more appealing. Not that if that's not the play, I'm not going to just sit up there because I want to be in a mountain. If the swamps were to be, I'll be in a swamp. But so I seem to gravitate toward more to the high ground. And that seems to be a good bet as well. Although a lot of that stuff up high is kind of barren, or at least the habitat's a lot poorer, so the deer density is lower. So if you aren't finding that 1 or 2 maybe mature bucks up there may not even be anything at all.
Working harder to get up there and seeing less deer.
Yeah. But then again,
but you can be rewarded.
You can be rewarded with a super old deer that's lived up there, and that's why he's old, because he lives in an area that not many people are going, at least deer hunting. So that's what I like to look for. The other thing is just habitat diversity. That's a huge one, and that's no different from anywhere else. But edges between conifers and hardwoods and edges of cuts. I mean, logging is huge. You can bet that if you have a significant logging presence in a particular area, the deer density is going to be higher, the deer are going to be healthier and bigger. So that's another really safe bet, is to look for areas with a lot of logging, swamps, logging, high ground, and edge.
So if you're going into a new spot to try to scout, find a big mature buck somewhere, what's your first step? What are you looking for? You looking for logging?
I go kind of geek out on that stuff, so I'm looking
on your maps first.
I'm trying to. So the one thing for me that kind of fires me up about a new spot, if I have experience in a spot and have a buck that I know, I really don't care how big he is if he's mature. I'm after that buck because I have a history with him.
Yeah.
But if the slate is clean and I'm going to a new area, I'm going to try to find an area that has a genetic or a potential to grow a really big deer. That's interesting to me and like it's a challenge. So the first thing I do is I really try to like do a lot of homework about what areas of the state of New England, of the country, have the genetic potential to produce a really big deer. So I start with that. I'm not just gonna go to like, southern Iowa. Like that's not what I'm saying. Like I'm looking at like, so like I look at, New England and the big woods. I'm gonna look for areas where I've, seen. You access to the record books, which aren't.
Yeah.
They're a little bit of information, but they miss a lot, and a lot of guys aren't entering.
A lot of guys aren't saying the right county. Yeah.
Right, yeah. So, I mean, but it gives you a little bit, and I just kind of like, social media is a big one too now. I'm always like making mental notes of like, if I hear about it, like what areas that deer, and I'm not looking for anybody's spots. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just looking for areas that tend to produce bigger deer in general, like counties, like portions of states, like southwestern part of this state or the northeastern part of the state or whatever. So I'm kind of looking for that. So once I've kind of found an area that I think is going to produce, some bigger deer, then I'll start to look for areas that are the furthest away from population centers, big towns. Yeah. And like, once again, that's not anything groundbreaking.
So you just look at the map and you look at the greenest place, right?
That's more or less. And then I look for, then I go to the topography and I look for the high ground. Yeah. And now you've eliminated a lot of stuff. And then I look at all the high ground and I'm looking for, areas with diverse habitat. And that's pretty much it. And then you got to walk because that's the aerial stuff will only tell you so much.
Head in there, look for scrapes, put cameras up on scrapes or what?
Yeah. I'm looking, scrapes are big. I'm not super, when I first am scouting, I'm not super concerned about sign. I'm more looking for, so I look for areas that I think are huntable. And if there is a deer there, I think I can have a chance to kill him based on the topography and the cover and, things that dictate movement, like a pinch point, funnel, like an edge, whatever. Like I'm not going to go in an area if I think it has, like for example, this is a great example. Some areas have 3,000 acres of cuts, right? And they're all like varying age, but there's no like distinct edges between them, and there's no topography that's going to, funnel movement. Yeah. There's probably a lot of deer in there and some great deer, but like, even if you're tracking, that's probably not ideal either, just to be in a thousands acres of cut. Like you need some break, but that's not, in my opinion, an ideal place to be able to actually kill a deer. You can find a big one there, but it's tough to kill them. So I'm looking at areas that are easier, that I think I can manage to hunt and kill a deer there.
They have a more distinct funnel.
More distinct, or just a big change in like habitat or whatever, right? I can theorize that, okay, I think deer are probably generally going to be doing this based on my experience, and that gives me an opportunity to hunt and kill a deer where it's like, if you're sitting in the middle of like a sea of the same type of stuff, it's really hard. Nothing is going to define movement. So I'm looking for that. And then when I get in those areas, I'm just kind of confirming that there's deer there. And then I'll run cameras to let me know what kind of deer are there. Obviously, if I find a big primary scrape in one of those locations, awesome. Like now, this is good.
But first you're honing in on the topography,
kind of the last thing
habitat
is like,
change.
The last thing is looking for like the little details, and like some of it's because of the turkey hunting, but a lot of the times when I'm scouting it, there's snow on the ground, so I can find scrapes to an extent because I know what areas and what kind of trees they like to scrape on, and I'm looking for them, and I can like observe the licking branch and see if it's been worked. But at the same time, until you see like the ground, it's tough to know. And like I really like to look and make, to see if a scrape's been used. It's a perennial scrape. I want to see like a dished out depression in the ground. I want to see tree roots that are exposed because it's been pawed for years, year after year after year. So I'm looking for those types of scrapes. And then, rubs are helpful, but like honestly, a lot of my best spots, I don't really find many rubs. I think that in the big woods, some deer just don't lay down a ton of sign, and if they do, it's in like these tight pockets. So you could have a big deer traveling through an area frequently, but he's not leaving a lot of sign. And I've seen a lot of that. Like, I just don't see much sign, but you run a camera on, pinch point or a trail, and you're like, whoa. Like you would have never thought that, caliber of bucks in the area, but they're there. So I don't get too caught up on sign. I love to see it. It's great when I find it. It reassures you and it kind of confirms it, but I'm more looking for, the habitat, the area, place I can kill a buck, and then just like, hey, there are deer here. There's deer tracks or sign, or maybe I found a whatever.
Yeah.
And then saying, okay, like what's here with the trail cameras, then running trail cameras to identify what's there. And then, after that, probably if I find a deer I'm looking for, I'm going with more trail cameras so I can learn as much about that animal as possible, and start to understand how he's interacting with his habitat and how he's moving through the area, try to figure out why if I can, and then, after that, develop a plan, hopefully to hunt him based on something that I've learned. Or maybe it's a deer that I think is not quite going to be my focus, but I want to learn him because I think if he makes a couple more years, he could be a giant deer that I really want to focus on. And I do a lot of that too, is run cameras in areas or scout areas that I don't even plan to hunt for a couple of years. And kind of learn about the area and learn about the bucks. And then when, those bucks get to a certain age, and now I have 2 or 3 years of experience on trail cameras learning, and I can effectively hunt. I think it's pretty difficult if you're a stand hunter to go into an area in the big woods and be successful that first year. That's a big challenge. The benefit of still hunting and tracking is you can, which is dangerous for a lot of big bucks, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's a great way, I always say, to learn an area that you want to start is, start and, when you get to tracking snow after the rut and track a deer. You can learn so much about a deer in a day by tracking him. It would take you 3 or 4 or 5 years to learn just hunting them or reading, dry ground sign or running cameras. Yeah. So if I have an opportunity in a new area to track a mature buck, I'm going to take it and learn and try to kill him, obviously, but it doesn't work out that way every time. So,
well, snow is such a big help, and it's it's where I do most of my scouting now. And last year, it actually helped me kill my second buck this year that I just threw up on my YouTube. I was just looking for sheds and walking around, and it's very easy to see beds. I mean, I can see beds without snow too, but it's just super easy with snow. And as you're shed hunting, marking down bedding locations and feeding locations, all that stuff, use that shed hunting to throw waypoints into whatever you're using as your app, right?
Yeah.
And then so this year, I had a good wind for this particular bedding spot that I marked down. I hadn't even thought about hunting that place ever because I'd been through it once. I marked the beds, but I had this weird wind, a southwest wind. We don't get a lot here. And that day I was just like, all right, I already went through this bedding area. I was still hunting with my bow, and it was kind of rainy and windy, and I need to find another bedding location. So I pulled out Onyx, and I was reminded that when I went through there. And went in there and just happened to catch a nice big 8-pointer going through that bedding when I got into that location. But it's because I was going through there in the snow the year before, and I marked.
Absolutely, little things like that can make a big difference. Time in the woods experience. The one thing I'll say for the types of a lot of the areas that I hunt in New England, you have to be careful with that winter sign because a lot of times a deer are in a totally different area. So you could get real excited about an area because maybe it's a yard or or maybe it's a wintering area, not necessarily like a giant deer yard. All deer don't go to those, but and you go back there and next November and it's vacant of animals and you're like, what happened? I thought there was a ton of sign here. So you have to be aware of that. I think if you can find that's why that tracking, it's still during the season, right? So there's nothing better than finding that sign when you know that it's been made during hunting season. So if you get that late snow and late November, December, there's a pretty good chance they're going to be back in there the next year during the season. I just get leery of finding sign like this time of year in February or tracks and getting all excited. And a lot of times the big woods it isn't that. And I don't even. It's kind of it's almost distracting to an extent. I don't even want to see sign. And honestly, a lot of places that I hunt. This time of year, there's no deer there. I won't see a deer track for miles. And so it's kind of I almost like it to an extent because it doesn't distract me and I'm purely looking for stuff made that I can see, like a rub on a tree that I know was made by a hardhorn buck or, a scrape that probably was worked during the season. So it's not a bad thing. But I think the best is when no foliage on the trees, no snow on the ground and the deer aren't in there, leaving sign for to confuse you. Then you can see everything from that previous fall, and that's the best time, and that's when I'm turkey hunting. Which isn't great.
I think that's a really good distinction to make, though, is that there's a big difference between the scouting tactics in the big woods versus suburbia. Like I because I think down here, from what I've seen anyway, just recently, in the last few years scouting down here, they do tend to use the same places, in the winter and during hunting season. But in the big woods, like you said, they're doing mass migrations in some places, and they're going to wintering yards, and it can be completely different.
And it's variable. I mean,
the further south you go,
the deer that we had a group of just like an awesome bachelor group this past. Well, they shed now or broke up and then they've left that area. But usually the deer leave where we're hunting by mid-January at the latest. But this year they stayed until I think a couple days ago. I was still getting pictures of these deer. And I was really surprised. I just think the snow didn't get bad until a couple days ago and whatever. I don't know. Maybe there is some mass crop up there. Maybe that's what they're on, whatever. They stayed later. I was surprised. So, but that could, and if you had scouted that sign, that is an area that they're in all fall. Yeah. So that would be valuable. But how would you know that unless so you have to be careful.
Then it can just mind fuck you.
Yeah. So you have to just be careful. I think the winter scouting, and you have to, that's the other thing. There's also some stuff in between, it's like you talk about like northern Maine and New Hampshire, and then you talk about, suburban Mass, and then there's a bunch of stuff in between that's like kind of a mixture of both. And as you get, more, so you have to get a feel for the deer in your area and what they're doing, before you like make any assumptions, I guess. That's an important thing I think that a lot of people maybe overlook is like try to understand what the deer in the area you're hunting are doing throughout the year and why they're doing it. What type of deer are you hunting? Are you hunting a deer that covers these giant 10-mile loops, or are you hunting a deer that these deer don't maybe travel as far, or maybe they do make bigger loops, but it's just learning about that.
That's another good point because, you can listen to podcasts and you can watch videos and you can say, oh, great, Just Hunt Club's putting out Northeastern stuff that's going to be, relatable to, but even in the Northeast, there's so many different,
absolutely,
so you have to learn your deer, your local deer.
Yeah, it's
what they do.
I'm like obsessed with trying to figure out the factors that make deer behave differently in different areas. Because I've had an opportunity, like I said, to hunt Canada out west, the Midwest, a little bit down south-ish. I'm not a huge fan of down south, but haven't hunted Texas or Alabama for deer, any of those, or Georgia, but down to Kentucky. Virginia area, but I
think Texas would be fun, huh?
It would be a blast, I'm sure. It's just not at the top of my list of things to do, but and I'm trying to figure out why they behave differently in different parts of the country, and then even regionally in New England, why because I think they do to an extent behave differently, and it's really interesting to try to I go to for example this year the Adirondacks. I hadn't hunted there before. I actually didn't hunt. I filmed, but it was really interesting because I went in with obviously a fair amount of experience in the mountains and the big woods, trying to see, directly apply that experience, but it was a little bit different, and trying to figure out why it was different, and it was really interesting.
Different trees there, right? It's a lot of different.
There's not. There's not really different trees. It's just the age of the trees. They're all mature.
Yeah, that's true.
And then they're really heavy on spruce fir and just junk trees like maple that's not doing much of anything. Some cherry, just a lot of useless trees. The habitat's poor out there because they don't cut in. There's not a lot. I mean, it was weird. I've never seen. So found some beeches. And it was it looked like under an apple tree around here, in the New England. They were just so focused on beech trees because that's the only thing that in that particular area that had mast. I think if you get, in some areas that Adirondacks, oaks are a big deal, but there really wasn't many oaks where we're at. And so it was just interesting to see those deer, that beech was a huge food source, whereas here you'd definitely see them in there, but I feel like there's other stuff that they're keying in on first, but there's just nothing out there. So, that's another thing, realizing, okay, this whole expanse has all mature timber. That's it. There's not much browse. I mean, the two things they're eating was fern and fern bulbs, and then beaches or beach nuts.
That's like
which there wasn't. I mean,
that's not their
don't
preferred.
Produce that much. No, it's not. I mean, they eat them for sure, and like.
But around here, you're not seeing it. In the suburbs and stuff. The deer have so much feed and different kinds of feed. They don't.
When you get in the mountains and up north, they're focusing on beach a lot more. But at the same time, they have a lot of browse to go with it. So it's kind of a more even, distribution on food sources. But it was like ferns, which is good. Well, there's ferns everywhere up there and that's the other challenge. It's
that's the only undergrowth.
There's literally ferns everywhere. So like, how do you find a feeding area when there's ferns everywhere?
Yeah.
So it was like we were keying in on beaches. We were like, and it's real open, so you can like look and see like a stand of beaches from like 200 yards away. Like, all right, let's go down and check out that area and see if there's any sign. And you could tell the trees that had produced that fall. So, just learning about your area is a big deal. And you're just saying like, people get on podcasts and talk about stuff and. Not all of them, but some of them have very limited experiences, and they're very good at one specific area and doing one specific thing.
Yep.
And they're experts at that,
But a listener can listen to that and say, "I'm going to apply that," but it's a completely different type of deer.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just, and I am always so cautious of that when I go to a new area of like, okay, this looks really similar or like sets up really similar to another place I hunted, but. What are the differences here? And then so I don't just dive in like this is my plan, this is what it's going to be. I'm kind of like work my way into a strategy, trying to like interpret everything that's going on, and listening to locals. That's a big one. People that have hunted there that have experience. So you have to be careful. You can probably apply something you hear from everybody.
Yeah.
But when you just try to paint your whole approach with a broad brush and just go and that's why people I think in New England are like just sick of hearing about hunting in the Midwest, because it's like that's just not that's not my reality. It's not how I hunt. It's not my situation. So, and you can apply things from that absolutely and learn from that, but it only gets you to a certain extent, and then you have to kind of learn about the intricacies of your specific area.
Right, like for instance, deer all bed, and they travel from their bed to food sources, and then they travel from there back to beds, and that's anywhere. But then there's so much more to deer hunting in between that.
I was talking to been helping a father-son set up a property up north, and to hunt. They bought a piece, and they're a lot of the stuff they've listened to in the past has been a lot of stuff based out of like the Midwest, and it's a lot of good information for that area, and a lot of it applies here too. But I just was kind of like, hey, you guys are looking at like a deer.
Are you talking on land management type?
Yeah. But it's the behavior is the same no matter if it's managed land or it's whatever.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
They're looking to try to make their land better to hunt.
Right.
And and there, and I did the same thing when I have a piece of land, and you're looking at like a shoebox of their habitat, right? And trying to think like, oh, these deer are going to bed on the west end of my property, and they get up and head east to the food, and it's like, no, they're going to bed 4 miles west of you, 7 properties away in a mile, and then they're going to get up, and then they may come
your
through
property
your property
is the
night.
food source.
Yeah, or it's one of 20,
right.
And it's like, you got to look way bigger picture around here. Like, it's almost like in the Midwest, if you took all the deer. Okay, so in New England, in the big woods, and obviously southern New England's a little bit different, and in suburbs, but you take like a 5,000 acre area, and then you have all the same type of movement, but it's this big, and they're traveling this far, and it takes 5,000 acres to house the deer that maybe in 200 acres in Wisconsin, you'd have the same thing happening, but it would be in this little microcosm, the same thing, and trying to be like, no, look way bigger, 10x what you're looking at right now, and that's the picture you get. And I think that, guys, and I fall into it a lot too. It's like, especially bow hunting, you're like looking at like, oh, this buck's feeding on this oak flat, and he's coming off I get a picture of him coming off the top of the mountain. Or that's where the does come. I bet he's up here. He's like, yeah, he could be there. He could be in a mile and a half up on a different mountain, and it could take him, 6 hours to get to that food source from his bed. And like, so you have to, that doesn't mean that you don't have what we're talking about where a deer's close by and, comes and to a food source or to whatever. That does happen.
I think the loops are just bigger, right?
It's like, just bigger scale. And sometimes they will bed close to you, and you will catch them in daylight because they only move 200 yards and you were close to their bed, and boom, and then it happens. But I think they have so many different areas that they're bedding in, and it's tough to like pin those down. And you hear so much about hunting buck beds, and I'm like, it's that's so hard, in my opinion, to apply to the big woods.
Yeah, I was gonna say, especially in the big woods.
It's like they could bet in 150 different places, and they probably bet in a different.
But it's
tough.
It's tougher just because the scale is bigger. Because like down here, I've noticed that these bucks are going on loops, but they're not as big of a loop as the big woods would be. They have the same amount of like bedding locations and everything, right? And they'll bed here, and then they'll go to another food source and they'll bed over there, and then another food source, and then a week later they're back. And I have seen around here, it's kind of like they're going on these little week loops, and I'll get this buck on a camera once a week, and then I'll be like, oh shit, I'll start piecing it together because he's in another location, and he's like halfway between there and here, and it's like he is really just doing a big loop. For the suburbs, I think that's big, but it's like a 3-mile loop.
Yeah, and I always say like tracking really opens your eyes to that. It's like, oh, we just tracked a buck 12 miles today, and I was worried about if he was bedded within 200 yards of me. It's like that's a stupid. I feel so stupid now. Like it really puts things into perspective, and it's like, oh, okay, so we did 12 miles. Like, all right,
that was nothing for him. That's his every day.
Like so. I got to rethink this whole thing. Like I got your approach, and I always try to keep that perspective because it's important. Everybody just seems to like drill down, and here's the thing: you can drill down on specific areas to be successful hunting. You just can't expect that deer is there all the time doing that same thing.
You got to sit there for a week,
right?
Like you guys do sometimes,
yeah,
right? How many days did you sit in a row on that stand over the?
It was
tote road there.
So it was 7. Well, so that hunt was a long time too. That was a different one. I actually think I sat a day longer this year. The tote road was long too. I've sat on that thing for probably 10 days.
Once you find a good funnel where you know they're crossing, like you keep going back to that in the big woods, like that you might just hunt that.
Absolutely, and it depends. I have to have a lot of strong evidence to for me to commit myself mentally in my time to a specific area, but. This year I hunted. I didn't even expect to be hunting there. It's just some things shifted in the area, and I had some information previously about the buck I was hunting. It was kind of like an afterthought spot. It was like probably could kill him there, but that's not like where I anticipated I'd be sitting. But it like came down to it, and he really wasn't using the area of his range that he had the past 2 years. Where I planned on sitting, and I was like, I got to shift my approach, but I had this information in my back pocket. Went and quick hung a stand like literally the day before I started hunting in the pouring rain because I didn't even have a stand or a camera there this year.
Yeah.
I was going on information from, the 3 previous years really. Actually, the previous year, the year before that, I didn't have a camera there, and the year before that, I did. So I have 4 years history.
But you were building that pipeline 4 years ago.
I had that information. I didn't end up killing that buck. I killed a different one, but it was just a really good rut area. Excuse me. So, and that's the thing. I don't think people. I used to be the same way. I'd jump around. It's like you hunt for a spot for a day and a half, and you're like, this spot sucks. Like, there's no deer here. It's not going down. And it's dried up, and it's like
people,
okay.
Of course, there's a huge thing too that doesn't really relate to the big woods, and I don't even really see it here sometimes. But you blow up your stand location because you spent too much time there.
No, well, I always say, and you probably can do that, but I think the only time I think that you're going to really blow up a stand location during those like peak rut dates is if you actually spook the buck you're after.
Yeah.
That
you miss them or
he wins you or one of the deer you're after, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you spook a doe and she blows and flips out, first of all, does tolerate that stuff and come back. Like they live in such tight little areas and they tolerate intrusion and being bumped. Like it's hard to get does to leave their little like doe group family area that they live in. So it's not good if they're doing that, especially if the buck's within earshot. But most of the time, that buck isn't within a mile of you or 2 miles of you. So that doe can stand there and blow at you for an hour and a half. That buck's on the next mountain. Like he doesn't hear you. He doesn't know that just happened. Mm-hmm. So he's going to come through there just like he always does, expecting that those does are there looking. And then like if you blew it up, it makes you. I always say like you could have a fireworks show at your stand location, and then the next day kill the biggest buck because he ran from 4 miles away by your stand, and that's the beauty of it. I mean, I am super cautious and try to hunt those locations with good entry and exit and wind, because you do never know when that deer is going to come through. And like realistically, sometimes they might come through twice a week, and he might come through at night. And if you have left a bunch of scent or like you're crossing his scent or his path, he might smell you and avoid that area. So like, it's not like you just throw caution to the wind and don't plan for that stuff. We do try to set up with. We're normally setting up with staying locations where we can have a pretty good shot of nothing getting downwind of us with like a northwest wind. It seems like westerly in particular is a prevailing during November. So we set up a lot of our November spots for that. But I'm really careful on access, exit, in and out, trying not to bump deer, so I can hunt that spot over and over and over again. But like if a doe or a small buck gets me, I'm not really concerned about it. It's not a big deal. So you got to be aware of that, and it's a different type of hunting. And maybe early season you may not get away with that as much if a deer is not moving it quite as far, and you're right in his core area, or at least maybe in the early season he's living in a condensed area or three areas. So you may not get away with much, but I think you can get away with a lot during the rut.
I wonder if that's what happened with that 9-pointer this year that came in after I rattled, and because I never saw him and I had no more pictures of him. I wonder if he's just old and wise, and like you said, he kind of just like, this spot, I don't need to be here anymore. I'm gonna go somewhere else. Or if he's on to me, he could also have been shot, but I just haven't seen him.
Yeah, a lot of stuff can happen. It's tough to say why they don't come back, right? Like you never really know unless you see the picture of him dead. Like, okay, well, someone shot him, but I think that. I think you can get away with a lot. I think people give up on spots too quickly. If you have the information and you've done your homework and have the data that's telling you that's the spot to sit, and you sit there for 2 days and you don't see anything, that doesn't mean anything at all.
Yeah.
That means nothing.
Yeah.
Day 3 could be the best day I've ever had in the woods, or it could be day 5, whatever. It takes a lot of patience and some time to put in a week all in the same location. And the other thing is it's pretty rare to get the same winds for a week straight. So the other thing that's important to do if you found the spot and you're going to sit there is try to pick a spot, a stand location where you have a lot of forgiving winds. Like maybe it's like, man, I just can't hunt on an east, but I can hunt on almost everything else.
Yeah.
Okay, well that's really good, especially if you know that we don't get really many east winds that time of year. If you get an east though, it's probably a good idea to maybe have a secondary stand set up in the same area on that same movement pattern, string of movement.
It's just barely off
that you can hunt it on an east, because the east wind day could be, and then you're not there. That could be the day that he runs through that week, and you missed him. You sat for 6 days, but you had an east wind, you weren't in there, and he went through, and well, that's it for you this year. Like you're not killing that buck, not going to see him again. So, keeping that in mind is big too. So
Pat Burns' buck this year too. That's the same thing. It was a day that he had been so cautious on this deer for years because he'd been after it and going in on all the right winds. But this day was the wrong wind for it. Mm-hmm. But it was in the rut, and he had to get in there and hunt it. And it was the worst wind for it, and he killed this buck that he'd never seen.
That happens too, right? Like that's the thing around here. You can't predict what these deer are gonna do. They're not robots. Yeah. You can't make them do their deer. They do what they want. No one told them they're supposed to do this and come from this direction. I always say, people, I'll tell some of my strategy, but what if, couldn't they come up through that cut? I'm like, yeah, sure. I don't think they're gonna though. And if they do, they do. But you're never gonna be 100% accurate in predicting movement and setting up stands with the wind, right? But if you can be right 70% of the time, that's better than being right 30% of the time and just ignoring the wind completely, right? So, and then you'll have those situations where, the wind's dead wrong and he comes in, whatever happens, and you kill him. But there's something to be said for being in the woods, right? You got to be in the woods. So, it's a balancing act. But, the wind's a big thing we set up for. And it's like, if you wait all week and the wind's dead wrong and that buck picks you up and he's 200 yards out coming your way, you don't even know you bumped him. Now you're going to sit there for an extra X amount of days, you don't even know it was there. It's like, man, that's mentally a tough thing to comprehend, that you just sat for 5 days, you sat it on the wrong wind, the buck got, you don't even know it, and he's not coming back, and you have no shot, and
you second guess everything.
Sitting there, So, I always try to make sure. The other thing that I like to do, if you can, if it's dense, it's really tough. I like to be able to see my downwind side pretty well, whether I'm blowing winds over open hardwoods or down a creek bed where I can see, or maybe over a cut or whatever. I feel good about that because I can see what got my wind or what's going to get my wind before it gets it. And then I know what it was. Like you hear a deer snort and run off, you're like, oh shit.
All right.
What was that?
That's
like,
a good little, yeah.
And the other thing is, if you have a gun in it with a bow, you have an opportunity to shoot that deer before he gets your wind or as he's getting your wind. A lot of times they will stick around for a second and figure it out. So
yeah, with a gun,
we've shot plenty of deer that we're probably going to get our wind if we didn't shoot them. So I am always like trying to get a lane or a visual on my downwind side if I can, even bow hunting really, because I've had the same thing. A lot of those deer will circle downwind of your stand, like. Especially if you're bow hunting and like they think something's up, and
if you're rattling or calling, they're always going to circle downwind of you.
Absolutely. So, it's if you can get a visual or just get us like, for example, this year I was hunting on the edge of a big cut, and it was kind of at the point where it was so thick that like the deer weren't going through the middle of it very much. They were running the edge, but kind of they're going to be right under my stand if they run the edge, and I'll have an opportunity to kill them before they get my wind. But it's just not that it's a type of cut. They're just like. They're going to browse around the edges. I mean, I'm sure they go in it once again, right? They're not robots. No one told them you can't walk through that cut. I'm sure that they do, but most of the time they don't. So that's what I banked on, and it worked out pretty well. I don't even know if we got winded that whole week. I mean, we hardly saw any deer until the last day and a half. But, that's the other thing. You just, there's not many deer to bust you in the big woods. So you can kind of keep getting away with stuff because they're just not there. I always say the same thing about calling is like people are like, man, I never have any luck rattling or grunting in like Maine or New Hampshire, Vermont. It's like, well, probably because 95% of the time, they can't hear you because they're nowhere close to you, right? Yeah. So they have to hear you to be able to react. So the percentage of time we're actually calling and they can hear you is such a small percentage of the time that maybe if you even get one response and you rattled 100 times, oh, I'm 1 for 5 on a buck, like, who knows? So, and I've called in bucks in the big woods.
Also, it's like it depends on the terrain again. Everything in the big woods kind of depends on the terrain features, right? Like Jeff Doyle's buck this year that he filmed and was up in the saddle, and there were two super high peaks. It was a no wind day, and it was completely quiet, and he was just in that saddle, rattled. You can get to both peaks. The sound was carrying to both of them, right? And if there's a buck up there on either of those peaks, feeding, bedding, whatever, then maybe you're going to catch the curiosity.
I think if a lot of the big woods, if it's not like I'd say in general the big woods get less pressure, right? That's kind of the idea of why one of the ideas, you want to be alone, you want to get away from people. But I'm sure there's areas that get more pressure than others. But I think if you're in an area that doesn't get a lot of pressure, you have a pretty good chance of calling in a deer by grunting or rattling if he can hear you, and you're in a good advantageous position where he's not going to get your wind first. But I think a lot of those deer, like they probably haven't heard that calling very much at all, so they have no reason to believe that it's not a real deer. So
it's like hunting. I mean, it's like fishing a remote pond or something, right? Like I used to carry a canoe with my buddy up through the worst shit in the world just to get to a pond that has never been fished before by a boat. Because there's no freaking roads around. Mm-hmm. And it's really fun doing that. I want to get back into doing that. But you get up there and you toss a bait out there they've never seen. You can go to some of these overfished ponds and lakes that's got 1,000 people on it in a day. I think those fish aren't biting the same way as those remote ponds do.
I fished in Labrador for brook trout, and like those fish see like a person every like 3 years because it's all like flying stuff. It's amazing. But my father goes up there pretty frequently and fishes, but like he told me, and I saw it to an extent, but he even fished some remote stuff that like, we've never fished that stretch of river, and fly in, and he's like, they'll like eat anything, like anything that resembled food, like a hook with like a colored hook, like anything, they're just like fighting. It's crazy. So that obviously, human intrusion, humans obviously have a big impact on the wildlife and their behavior. From brook trout to whitetails, like across the board. So, the more human presence there is in their environment, the more they're going to react to it, and the more savvy they're going to be for sure.
Yep. Well, we're going to wrap this up in a minute, but I want to talk about John Lewis killed a beast, and he killed that beast buck. What was the story around that, man? That was awesome.
That was awesome.
That deer is huge. For him. Yeah. You know that buck probably, right?
I kinda. So that was, that was just wild. Well, that was I didn't really answer your question. So like that was the first day I started sitting during the rut.
Yeah.
And I was like an hour in, and I get a FaceTime from from John Lewis, and he had come up from New York to hunt for 3 days, and I was like, he's like, I want to come up and hunt, and like and I was like, well, we're starting to get we might get some snow up high, so like
first time hunting in New Hampshire too, right?
For deer, yeah.
Yeah.
And so he's like, yeah, come up. I'm like, he's like, I don't have that much time. I'm like, whatever. I'm like, you're here during the best dates. The weather's gonna be great. Looks like we're getting snow. He like doesn't like to be in a stand, so it's like perfect. I'm like, if you were to come, this is the time. Yeah. So he's like, all right. So he comes up, and I'm like, I got a bunch of those spots that I'm not hunting, but I scouted and run cameras, and so I'm kind of like running through the spots with him and telling him about this spot. I'm like, you can try this. This has this, and he picked one that was like a big cut, like hundreds of acres on a mountainside, and I was like, it's loaded with deer. I'm like, it's probably a good place to still hunt. Like, it's a lot of topography. You can like get around. There's some logging roads. There's some edges between mature timber and like the cut, and like. Yeah, whatever. And I had went up there. So I scouted it like 2 winters ago. Last year, well, in 2020.
Shit.
Did it die?
Yeah, but I hope that, let me get it back real quick. I was just looking at that, and problem is it goes down to one. It had just changed to one frickin' bar, and then it dies real fast after that. Fuck, this has happened before, and it was really hard to get the fucking audio back.
Oh, do you think maybe it? Oh, it would suck. Maybe. It's happened off. That happened.
Maybe, but at least we got audio on that.
Oh, that's true. We did a podcast with Aaron Warburton once, and it was a great podcast. Like, we really like got into like a lot of cool stuff and like just about hunting and like, hunting culture, and it was like such a great, we just got into it. It was like flowing, and then it's like, oh, we lost that whole thing.
Yeah.
And like we were like, hey Aaron, we lost all that. You want to do it again? He's like, yeah, sure, why not, whatever.
And then
it just wasn't even close to the same. No, it wasn't even close. It was like, this sucks.
Yeah, I was doing one with Timmy Bolduc and Mark Woodman like that this year. That's the other time this happened. And Woodman was talking about hunting with the Benoit, and he was telling some great stories.
Someone told me that Jason told me that he used to film the Benoits. I didn't even know that.
I think we're gonna be good because this just started on number 2. All right, so let's just finish that.
So yeah, you're asking me at John's buck. So yeah, it was an area that I had scouted 2 winters ago.
Yeah.
I just liked the habitat there. I just knew there was going to be a bunch of bucks, and it was a pretty easy place to figure out where the activity was going to be.
But it's a semi-recently scouted place. Yeah, it's not like
2 years. Yeah, I had scouted it. I think it was winter of 2020. Yep. I think, yeah. Yep. Ran cameras there in 2020 fall, summer through the season, and I got like 3 really solid bucks in there. One big old, like, I don't know, 200 pound, I mean, who knows, I didn't weigh him, but 200 pounds, big old 8-pointer, like just a big deer. And then I got a big 10 that was like a high score type deer. And then I got like another really solid, I think, just a whatever, mature buck, something, nothing crazy, but I was like, well, that's good. And I only ran like, I think 3 cameras in a 500 acre area. So I was like, that's pretty good. So yeah. I like that. And so I was like, I'm going to run cameras. And I had one particular area right on there's like this corner, this inside corner on this cut where it's like all cut. And then the corner, the 90-degree corner is all mature timber. And it's this knob on this cut. It's just like everything kind of came together there with edge habitat and topography. And I really liked it. And I got some good daylight pictures of a couple of those big bucks on that. I made a mock scrape right there, right on the edge of the cut in the mature timber. And it just looked like a great area. It looked like a ton of browse. I also found a stand of like spruce that was like shredded. I was like, holy crap. Like, I don't know if it was a buck was bedding there for a point. I don't know. There's a lot of big rubs. And I was like, ooh. That was one of the times where I found the sign in the area that I was like, okay. And that's why I kind of came back. I was like, this is great. Yeah. So this year, I didn't even bother running cameras in the summer. But I went up in there in like early October. And what I like to do, because when I'm developing like these long-term plans, I'm mostly focused on hunting the rut. Like that's when I think my best opportunity is. Not that I won't hunt early season, I'll try, but and I sometimes have success, but really banking on the rut. So like I'm not really too worried about what's going on early or late, but I want to have my cameras there from like October 15th through November. That seems to be like I'm probably going to get every buck within the area on like a really good camera location during those dates. So I want to have those cameras there if I can. So I went on there this October again and put cameras in some of the same locations, a few different ones, and I didn't check them. I knew there was good bucks in there from the years past. I'm sure some of them at least made it. Didn't know if any of them getting killed. I don't know if I would have heard, but whatever. So pretty good chance there's some good ones in there. So when John said it came, he liked the idea of that cut, and like I'm like, there's a ton of there's more. It's crazy how many. Like I always say this, but like the early succession growth and the browse, like the logging operations, there's a disproportionate amount of deer in those areas and the rest of it. So there's a lot of deer for that type of mountain big woods habitat in that particular mountainside because of the cuts, hundreds of acres of nearly clear cut. So he decided that was what his jam is. Like, I'm gonna go up in there. I'm like, great. I'm like, I gave him, we use Hunt Stand as an app, and I shared my hunt area with him, and he could see all my pins and everything I had. And so he got on his phone, and I was like, I just work up through here, check those cameras, and see what you see. I don't know. I haven't been up there in a month. I'm like, you'll probably find something decent, I think, to hunt for a couple days or whatever. So he works up the first camera.
This is all on video too, so watch it if you haven't watched it.
Oh yeah, it is, absolutely. Yeah. It's a cool video.
It's awesome.
It's wild. And so he works up through, he checks the first camera, had a mature buck on it, not the one he killed though. And then he kind of worked west maybe, I don't know, that's probably like a quarter mile, maybe a half mile, right to that edge of that cut, where that spot I'm talking about, where it's like the inside corner and like the high point on the land. It's not quite the mountaintop, it's like another high point off the top of the mountain. And there was a camera on the way there. It was dead, and he was giving me a hard time about that. Like, oh, you sent me to a place with dead cameras. I'm like, okay, sorry, like whatever, man. So then he gets the last camera, and in the interview and in the video, he's kidding, but he's like, oh yeah, Brett sends me to this place, and like all I've seen is like hunters and dead cameras, like awesome. And little does he know, the card he's holding and the camera has like this, 100 and I think he was like high 150s buck on it, and it's like. And he didn't even look at it. He just like looked at it quick. And in his defense, the video of the deer, a couple of the deer, like the sun setting, you can't really see it very well. And it's on video, so he's like, I don't know, looks like a decent buck, whatever. Yeah. And he's like, trying to look it on his phone, and he's still hunting too. He's like, yeah, it looks good. And then he finds a bunch of sign, and he's like, man, this looks good in here. So we were like having dinner after, and he's like, yeah, it looks good in there. I think I should go back in the room. I'm like, I don't know what it was in there. And he's like, well, I didn't really look. I'm like, give me the card. So give me the card, and I'm like flipping through, and I'm like, well, that's a solid big mature 8. And then that buck he kills comes across. I'm like, whoa. I'm like, look at that thing. And he's like a big 10 with big brows, tall tines. He had split G3s on both sides.
I was gonna say, it looks like I think he has some junk or something.
Yeah, he was a wild look, not like a superior genetic antler deer than anything in like our area for the most part. And like he didn't look super old to me, but I was like, whatever, man. Like you got 3 days and like go in there, like whatever. I mean, and I thought to myself, man, if he doesn't kill that deer, I think I might go after that deer next year, like that type of thing. Yeah. Because he's there for 3 days and probably won't be back for a year if at all to deer hunt. So he went in. So I went to hunt. He went back in there, and we got fresh snow, and I was just so on my rut grind in this one spot, hunting this one particular deer, more or less. I didn't really want to track because I felt like I had a really good opportunity at that deer in that spot. And I actually, I killed a different one and saw that buck I was after. So that was a pretty good decision by me, I feel like. But, John didn't really have a ton to go on. He brought in like a saddle, and he was going to potentially sit if he couldn't cut a good track in that spot.
Yeah.
And, he's like texting me. He's like, you think I should track? I'm like, yeah, for sure. Like, that's your best shot. And if you get fresh snow, we know there's big bucks in the air. Like, go after them, man. Like, so he's like, oh, okay, yeah. He's like, we gotta drop some of this gear though, because I brought the saddle and the platforms with me. Yeah. And so he's like, all right, yeah, we'll do that. And he's like, I'm just gonna work up to like that camera location and just like kind of like chill out for a second and like assess. And so he gets up on that knob, goes to the camera, and he's like, just kind of like worked just a little bit down from there, maybe like 50, 60 yards so we could like get a good vantage point. And he just like stops. And I think he said to Jake, our camera guy, he was like, he's like, he was hot too. Oh, he got kind of turned around going in. So he was like kind of irritated. He's like, it's first light. Like it was really cold that morning too. He's like, let's just chill out for a minute and just sit here and like let everything calm down and just see maybe something will cruise, whatever. Like he's like, a big buck could cruise right up here.
Yeah.
He'll know as soon as he says, he looks down and that giant deer is coming right through the hardwoods below him. And he just goes, big buck right here. You see him? Yep. Bang, and shoots him. And it's like, and he's just shot this giant New Hampshire deer that like, I mean, it's probably scores a touch higher than anything I've ever killed in New Hampshire. And it's like, and he FaceTimes me. He's like, I just killed that giant. I'm like, okay. He's like, no, I swear to God. I'm like, come on. And he has like the worst luck out of anybody that I know. So like, it was like
until this
year, right? And he had
good
awesome
one in Indiana too.
Yeah, he went, did the public land challenge with hunting public, and killed, had the most success out of anybody there, and had awesome hunts. So, that was awesome, and it was just like so cool to see that. And so it was an awesome deer. It was like 100 and just shy of 200 pounds. And like I said, it was pushing 160, and just a huge deer.
Kind of chocolate rack too, wasn't he?
He had a dark caramel type color. He was just a beautiful buck, and kept looking at him. Man, he doesn't look that old. I kept thinking. So we sent the teeth in, and he was only a 4-year-old.
Wow.
Which like blows my mind because
Wow.
you think I'm talking about how deer are peaking at 7 years old, and like, he's already almost 160 inches as a 4-year-old. Like, and he had the frame and I think that deer was probably going to be a
oh my God,
Boone and Crockett buck.
Yeah.
But if he made, at the same time, like hell, I mean, I'm so pumped he shot it.
Of course,
Forget, I don't, whatever. But it's just cool to see that type of animal is running around. I mean, they're rare, but they're there.
Genetics are in there
right,
too.
And they're there, but I mean, who knows if it'll surface ever again? But yeah, it was really cool. I'm pumped for him.
Yeah.
And he's just like, it was just cool to see. That was a fun hunt. We we were doing our rut camp then, so we had a lot of guys and like to go get his deer out. So, that was one time. I was talking earlier how it's like kind of a solitary pursuit. I mean, we have a camera guy, so it changes a little bit, but that was a cool thing to experience with everybody. Go get that deer out and celebrate with him. So, and we got they came in from New York, so we got some the cross pollination of the two kind of factors of the Just Hunt Club, the guys from New York. And the guys
it was really
from
fun to see. It was just a fun video.
Yeah, it was awesome.
It was
so
great.
We had a great year. We really are. I mean, we killed 3 exceptional bucks in New Hampshire on video, and John did great in Indiana, and like it just was a great season. We just were fortunate. We worked hard.
And the opposite of Hunt Public. I mean, those guys.
Yeah, they struggled.
They struggled, but they still have great still put out awesome content. But it's just that's what hunting is. One year you guys might have great content and great luck, and next year it's a struggle. But
yeah, and it's interesting because I feel like at least for our stuff in New Hampshire, when we have a year like that, that's a culmination of like several years of hard work and like scouting and planning and figuring stuff out. I know John's was lucky, but at the same time, like, he was in the right place at the right time, purposefully, like, in there. Like, he went in there with the right weather, the right dates, and then I had the scouting and information to know that, like, I mean, he probably would have been sitting, if he was sitting in a stand, he probably would have been sitting right there, so he would have killed that buck anyway. And, if he tracked him down, he would have tracked him down great. But, it was lucky for sure to roll in from New York and have your literally first morning ever deer hunting in New Hampshire kill this great giant buck. But, it was luck that happened that quick, but it's not luck that he killed that deer. And it's, Ross and I had.
Oh no, this thing's going to die again.
It is. Okay. I guess we should wrap her up then.
Yeah, it just did die. But,
we'll what kind of batteries you running here?
We'll wrap it up on video. Those must have been already expunged batteries.
Oh, I gotcha.
Yeah, dude. Thanks a lot for coming down.
Yeah, that was fun. I'm glad that I got it down. We've finally been talking about doing it for a bit, and finally got to do it. So sorry I didn't bring any antlers or big racks. I asked Pat, like, what should I bring? Do I need anything? He's like, oh, you can bring some antlers.
Usually guys like to bring.
I'm like, I got some sheds, but like they're older, and like I just don't have time to shed hunt anymore. And I'm like, all my antlers are like at the taxidermist, so I can't bring them, and like then I got mounts, and I'm not gonna walk in with a couple mounts under each arm. That's kind of silly. So
it's not like people need to see it to prove.
No, and it's just for the you know, the video aspect. It'd be cool to have a big, you know.
Yeah, some
Euro, but you know, you got some stuff here, so we're good to go.
Yeah,
but,
a little bit in the background there, but we'll see you at Huntstock. You guys are coming.
Yeah, we're gonna come. The other thing to keep in mind, or for people, if you are a turkey hunter, and if you're not, we're doing a giveaway on our YouTube channel. You can actually go to our website to enter, or you can go to YouTube channel and watch our latest video, and we'll tell you how to enter. But we're giving away a turkey hunt in New Hampshire for potentially this year. If you can't make it this year, next year, whatever, you guys can. If you win, you can plan it with us. And then we're giving away a Mossberg turkey gun of your choice, so you can pick up a 410, a 20 gauge, a 12 gauge, a pump, an auto load, or whatever. And then we're gonna give away another 940 turkey gun, 12 gauge gun. So they'll be first and second place, and go and enter on our website. And
JustHuntClub.com. Yeah, I was just
JustHuntClub.com, and or you can, if you find us on social media, all that information is on our social media for a giveaway, if that's easier for you to maneuver to the giveaway. So that will be fun. Will be cool. We like to give back if we can. Mossberg's been a great partner of ours and is willing to, you know, do this stuff with us and give back. And yeah, we're gonna hopefully hunt with. I don't know where they're gonna be from. We have a lot of turkey hunters that are around the country that watch our stuff. So maybe someone from local, or maybe someone from Alabama. Who knows? But it'll be cool to share the woods with someone, and that's like what we got to. I like to do that social aspect of turkey hunting, so it should be cool. So
yeah, awesome.
Go ahead and enter that, and if you can, if you like our content, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. It helps us big time, and we're trying to make relatable content to, you know, people in the Northeast. So
yeah, come see them at Huntstock. Do you know who's coming yet?
We don't. We're trying to figure it out. I'm sure. Yeah, we got a decent sized crew, and we're pretty well spread out along. I mean, not too far, so we're trying to figure it out. And it's, you know, it's a ways away, so people trying to nail down schedules. Right. But yeah, we'll probably have
it's a popular wedding weekend too. So.
Yeah, weddings are freaking killer. It's like,
we're aging out of that though. I feel like.
Yeah, thank God. It was a brutal stage. I was like, I gotta I got a wedding in late October, and I'm like, no, like. I can't go to that. Sorry, unless you're like my immediate family. It's
oh my God, so. my wife's best friend was getting married on the opening weekend of Vermont. You know, it was like November 11th but then COVID canceled. It was during the COVID year, so it got canceled. So it was
sorry about your wedding, but you know, it's a tough one.
All right, buddy.
All right, cool.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Yep.